Chapter 727. In the vast heaven. No one would have thought that on the day of the transcending God ruler's disciple selection, such a battle would erupt at the peak of the first heaven. People from both sides died continuously. The blood on the mountain's back had already gathered into a stream that flowed from top to bottom. The entire mountain seemed to have a dark red color. Long Chen and the Nether King were still in a deadlock with the transcending God ruler. The three god residences rose and fell one after another. Following Long Chen's cold snort, a sword ray broke the deadlock. This sword ray was the transcending God ruler's immortal weapon. The immortal weapon streaked across the sky and returned to Long Chen's hand as if it was being pulled. Han Shuzi couldn't help but reveal a hint of bewilderment in his eyes when he saw this. Ever since Long Chen appeared, he had been on guard against this sword. He had been using his powerful divine soul to suppress it. However, this sword seemed to have sensed it. It was truly strange. Heavenly domain. Long Chen's sword was like a rainbow. His body emitted a boundless divine light. The vast power was like a tsunami that engulfed the surrounding area. Unrestrained netherworld sea. The Nether King muttered a Buddhist chant. Behind him, demonic aura filled the sky. In the blink of an eye, the two of them flew toward the transcendent sovereign. The two of them were surrounded by a domain. The laws of heaven and earth within 100,000 feet collapsed. Countless mountain ranges turned into powder. The sky seemed to be filled with flowing flames. It also seemed like ghosts overflowed the sky. The transcending God ruler sneered. He soared into the sky. Light revolved around his body. 9 golden crows cried out continuously. The three of them disappeared in the sky. Everyone subconsciously looked up. They saw flowing flames falling from the sky. Demonic aura was as sharp as swords and sabers. Sword aura filled the sky and swept down like rain. Ah ah ah! Countless painful screams sounded from the crowd. Regardless of whether it was flowing flames, sword aura, or demonic aura, any one of them was enough to heavily injure a Nirvana sovereign. Even a yin-yang realm expert had to temporarily avoid them. As for those below the sovereign realm, once they touched the heavenly immortal realm experts, they instantly turned into powder. In less than 10 breaths of time, the number of people who died was close to 10,000. Retreat. We can't continue fighting under the three of them. If we continue fighting like this, we will all die in the aftermath of their battle. The combat power of a heavenly immortal realm expert is too terrifying. We're not fighting anymore. All of you, retreat. Cries of astonishment and even more cries of terror. Heavenly Mountain seemed to have turned into hell. In a day's time, the battle of the heavenly immortal realm experts. Only the sovereigns were still fighting. Swoosh swoosh. A Buddha statue descended from the sky. Countless people looked up at the sky above Sky Mountain. Hell King's Buddha statue fell heavily into the mountain, and there was a bloody spear in his chest. Above the long spear, there seemed to be a wisp of golden flame that soared into the sky. The Nether King's soul seemed to have been nailed to the ground by this spear. Boom boom boom. Then, a huge dragon descended from the sky, smashing several mountains into smithereens. The expressions of the various divine beast war souls changed abruptly. They pushed aside the sovereigns around them and charged towards Long Chen. The heavenly palace rulers and the ancients behind them were overjoyed. The ruler of the first heavenly palace snorted. These divine beast war souls are all at the dominator realm of the 6 paths. Every one of them is terrifyingly powerful. Looks like the Imperial College was right. The Imperial College said on the Bloodline Master ranking that the Heavenly Dragon bloodline was accompanied by divine beast war souls. They were all inherited from the primordial age. Everyone also took a deep breath of turbid air. These divine beast war souls were ridiculously powerful. Each of them was on par with the ruler of the first heavenly palace. They even had a slight chance of winning. But in comparison, there were still too many sovereigns in the heavenly palaces. They couldn't intervene in the battle between Han Shuzi and the other two, but the outcome seemed to be clear. Han Shuzi had defeated 2 heavenly immortals by himself. Countless people stopped attacking, and even the devil race couldn't help but roar as they retreated, breaking away from the battlefield. Too many people had died in this battle. Qing Xian and the others led one battle formation after another toward Longchen. They were all covered in blood, and their faces were full of worry. The battle formations that were still rushing toward Longchen were those who had followed Longchen. Although their cultivation hadn't reached the Dominator realm, they were almost invincible against heavenly immortals with the battle formations that Longchen had left behind. Several divine generals and divine beast war souls were approaching Longchen. Qing Xian and the others heard a dragon's roar. Everyone stopped dead in their tracks. Longchen's dragon body swayed and turned into a human. There was a terrifying bloody hole in his chest, and golden flames were constantly burning on it. If one looked closely, they would see that it was a spear wound. A spear had pierced Longchen's chest and nailed the Nether King to the ground. Seeing Longchen's wound, Qing Xian, divine beast war souls, and the divine generals all looked gloomy and clenched their fists tightly. Han Shuzi, the strongest heavenly immortal in the 10 Directions celestial domain, was terrifyingly powerful. Countless people from the heavenly palace started to shout. Who in the 10 Directions celestial domain can fight a transcendent dominator? You're overestimating yourself. 2 heavenly immortals were pierced by a spear. It's ridiculous. So what if he fended off our attacks today? He didn't want to be a good disciple and had to disobey his master. I'm afraid his divine soul will be tempered in the end. Rumble. Longchen stood up slowly. He was a transcendent dominator, but he had just descended from the sky. Complete heavenly immortal? Your cultivation has almost reached the half-step Great Emperor. Longchen's voice was a little hoarse. The transcendent dominator's cultivation was so strong that it was beyond his imagination. In the battle in his previous life, as the transcendent dominator had said, he hadn't used his full strength. The transcendent dominator's eyes showed a hint of mockery. He said indifferently, Great Emperor? In this space, except for the primal chaos golden codex, I'm afraid even your Great Emperor body can't reach the Great Emperor level. Since you've delivered the primal chaos golden codex to me today, you can go to hell. As soon as the transcendent dominator's voice fell, he waved his right hand, and a golden crow phantom appeared in the sky, burning with golden flames. Just as the attack was about to hit Longchen, a sword ray fell from the 9 heavens. The sword ray pierced through the sky, spanning tens of thousands of miles. Buzz! In all directions, the weapons in the hands of countless experts began to hum. There were even swords that were directly crushed into powder. Even Longchen's immortal weapon trembled as if it was being pulled by some strange force. Rumble! The sword ray instantly annihilated Han Shuzi, and even the golden crow attack behind him was blown away. Everyone's gaze turned to the distant sky, and they froze on the spot. Chapter 728. Countless sovereigns turned pale with fright at the sight of this oncoming sword. Even Longchen couldn't help but be startled. Although he still had many tricks up his sleeve, this sword was beyond his expectations. Even he couldn't unleash the power of this sword. His combat strength might be average, but his pure sword Tao was something no one could compare to. The first heaven's innate purple aura was extremely dense, and the space barrier was unbreakable. But now, there was another sword shadow flying over from the void. The sword appeared, and Longchen's immortal weapon hummed as the female sword spirit appeared. Her eyes were filled with desolation as she stared softly at the incoming sword shadow. Longchen suddenly understood. His pupils constricted, and he cried out, Jianshi-san. Jianshi-san hadn't heard from him since his sword duel with the sword sage in the 10th heaven. Longchen had never disturbed him. He knew how difficult the path of sword duel was, but what was Jianshi-san's cultivation base at that time? Today, he shattered the attack of a transcendent ruler with a single sword strike. This sword strike was enough to make him one of the top powerhouses in the 10 heavens. Master, 13 has turned into a sword. From now on, there is no saint in the sword Tao. Jianshirsan's voice rolled out like a sword ray into the ears of countless people. His voice seemed to pierce through everyone's souls. The sword shadow shook and transformed into a cold and resolute young man. He still carried a broken sword on his back. His figure seemed both real and illusory, and his entire person seemed to be a sword spirit. Longchen stared blankly at Jianshirsan. He could clearly sense his cultivation base. Jianshirsan had reached the dominator realm of the six paths. Hiss. Longchen couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Compared to everyone present, his shock couldn't be any greater. He stepped into the Ingress realm in this life thanks to the efforts of his previous life and the help of the Primal Chaos Golden Codex. But Jianshirsan wasn't like that. He was only about the same age as Longchen. Longchen probed further with his divine sense and discovered something strange about the Jianshirsan. At this moment, his entire being had turned into a sword spirit. He hadn't even condensed his physical body yet. His soul brand had already been through the vicissitudes of life for hundreds of years. This sword symposium seemed to be far from as simple as Longchen had imagined. Rumble. Longchen didn't have time to ask any questions before the sword light that covered the sky began to crumble. It was as if a pair of giant hands had torn it apart. Han Shuzi's face was as gloomy as water as he slowly walked out from the crowd. Han Shuzi fixed his eyes on Jianshirsan. He frowned and sneered. I didn't expect it to be another person from the corpse world, another world of corpses. Longchen blasted away the magic tool that was suppressing the Netherworld King's body. When he heard this, he couldn't help but pay attention. He subconsciously looked at the immortal weapon in his hand. Jianshirsan's current appearance was most likely related to the opportunity he obtained from the sword pond. Thinking of the many strange things about the sword spirit woman, Longchen was even more confused. Han Shuzi didn't intend to say anything more. He glanced at Jianshirsan and then at Longchen. Jianshirsan waved his hand and an illusory broken sword appeared in his hand. He didn't seem to be afraid of Han Shuzi. His eyes were still cold and resolute. He was like a sword, and his soul was like a sword. He was fearless, and so was life and death. Longchen shook his head and said to Jianshirsan, "You protect Qingxian and the others. Just delay the various clans of the Qingyun realm. His life can only be in my hands." Jianshirsan didn't have the slightest intention to go against Longchen's words. If it wasn't for Longchen, he wouldn't be where he was today. With his original aptitude, even if he spent his entire life on the sword, he would still be limited by his aptitude. The Saint Realm or the Celestial Realm was his limit. But now, his swordsmanship was boundless. However, in comparison, when the others heard Longchen's words, it was as if they were looking at an idiot. Even the Nether King couldn't help but have a strange look in his eyes. It was unwise to reject a teammate who could pressure Han Shuzi. Han Shuzi's combat power was beyond the Nether King's imagination. Last time, the Nether King was defeated by Han Shuzi. He had some understanding of Han Shuzi. But now, it seemed that he had only seen the tip of the iceberg. If it wasn't for Longchen's help, he would have died in Han Shuzi's hands. Han Shuzi looked at Longchen deeply. Then, with a playful look, he said, "Great carefree heavenly demon scripture, Nether King? If it wasn't for the fact that I found his cultivation method interesting, he wouldn't be alive today." As Han Shuzi finished speaking, he waved his right hand and the long spear condensed in his hand again like countless stars. In the distant sky, the people from the Imperial College kept moving. Their eyes flickered. The scholarly young man stared at the long spear in Han Shuzi's hand and said, "The red tasseled starlight spear is an ancient artifact. It has 3,600 starlight formations carved on it. Its power is comparable to an immortal weapon. Being ranked 9th on the ancient artifact ranking might be too low. Being able to condense starlight into a body can make it into the top 5. Everyone was speechless as they looked at the Imperial College in the sky. Under such circumstances, only the people from the Imperial College dared to watch from such a close distance. They even dared to comment from the side. Everyone ignored the people from the Imperial College. The long spear moved again and pierced through the sky. It wasn't a celestial art, but it had an unpredictable power. Everywhere the long spear passed, the power of rules surrounded it. There were even divine runes formed by the starlight. Wherever the spear light passed, even the space of the first heaven cracked inch by inch. Everyone looked at the spear and felt a chill down their spines. It was probably this spear that had pierced through Long Chen and the Nether King at the same time. Everyone looked at the spear rushing towards Long Chen. They knew that even if Long Chen didn't die, he would lose half his life. Long Chen's face suddenly revealed a murderous intent, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. The immortal weapon in his hand slammed towards the spear. When the two weapons collided, there was a rumbling sound that caused the earth to tremble. It was as if the entire sky was about to shatter. Countless sparks bloomed at the place where the two weapons collided. Shadow Prison. Everyone's eyes were blinded by the intense light. Even Han Shuzi was no exception. However, the moment he blinked, a wave of cold killing intent shot up from the black shadow under his feet. Countless terrifying rule force and assassination force poured into his body in an instant. Rumble. The light disappeared in an instant. When everyone opened their eyes again, they stared at Han Shuzi. There was another person at the place where Han Shuzi had been standing. This person's entire body was pitch black and filled with demonic chi. His face was cold and evil. He looked exactly like Long Chen. Behind him, Han Shuzi's body started to crumble. When the various Heaven Palace rulers saw this, their expressions changed drastically. They wanted to rush out. Chapter 729. Jian Shisan had forced the rulers of the various celestial domains to retreat with a single strike. Everyone was stunned. They saw Long Chen's shadow in him. When Long Chen had reached the Six Paths realm, he was the strongest person under the Ascension realm. Now that Long Chen had reached the Ascension realm, his disciple, Jian Shisan, had suppressed the rulers of the celestial palaces with his Six Paths realm cultivation. The 9 divine beast war souls looked at each other, nodded at Jian Shisan, and charged toward Long Chen at the same time. Jian Shisan stood in front of the rulers of the celestial palaces and said coldly, "Those who cross this ravine will die under my sword." After he finished speaking, under Long Chen's sword, a sword screen actually slanted out. This sword veil isolated the people of the various celestial domains. When the rulers of the celestial palaces saw this, they immediately signaled the ancient clan rulers behind them to attack together. However, the ancient clan rulers looked at each other, and none of them dared to move. Although they chose to stand behind Han Shuzi, they did not dare to cross the sword veil in front of them. One must know that Jian Shisan had dispersed Han Shuzi's attack with a single strike. Moreover, there were 4 Ascension realm cultivators behind Jian Shisan. If they were at the Six Paths realm, they might be of some use. However, they were only at the Yin-Yang realm and Nirvana realm. They would not die for Han Shuzi. At least not now, when the outcome of the battle was not clear. The body of the Ascension realm cultivator shattered rapidly. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him. If Han Shuzi only had his divine soul, then Long Chen and the others would have a 70% chance of winning today's battle. Buzz. However, in the next moment, everyone realized how wrong they were. Han Shuzi's strength was beyond their expectations. His body was shattered, but when his divine soul was released, the power it emitted was far greater than before. Long Chen's demonic avatar's expression changed drastically. It turned into a black shadow and disappeared. The demonic avatar appeared beside Long Chen and the Nether King. The 9 divine beast war souls were already standing behind them. All of them were staring at Han Shuzi. Han Shuzi stared at Long Chen as well. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he said in a deep voice, "What a cunning man. You've held back for so long just for this move. You've chosen the best opportunity to use it. But such an attack is not enough to kill my spirit." Long Chen's face was ashen. He had been waiting for this attack for a long time. However, now that he had seen Han Shuzi's godly soul, he realized that something was off. Although Han Shuzi's physical body was destroyed, his spiritual soul was not weakened at all. Instead, it emitted an even more terrifying aura. It was as if his physical body was not his aid, but his shackles. Hanshuzi's godly soul soared into the sky and transformed into a godly body that was 10,000 feet tall. Bloodline ability, 9 Suns Heaven Refinement. He waved his right hand, and 9 golden crows covered in golden flames flew out. 9 golden crows flew out from behind Hanshuzi's back, like 9 meteors flying backward into the sky. In the next moment, there were already 10 blazing suns in the sky. Countless golden flames fell from the 10 blazing suns at the same time. The golden flames flowed down like a waterfall of lava. Their target was Long Chen and the Nether King. Roar! Long Chen soared into the sky. With a loud roar, he transformed into the firmament celestial body again. Bloodline ability, 6 Paths of Reincarnation. The dragon's roar was heard, and the golden flames in the sky seemed to have sunk into a quagmire. It was as though they were restrained by countless rules. The 9 godly beast fighting souls looked at each other and they were determined. I'm Tao Tai under the Firmament clan. With my current body, I summon the godly beast fighting souls. I'm Tao Tai under the Firmament clan. With my current body, I summon the godly beast fighting souls. I'm Taowen under the Firmament clan. With my current body, I'm Taowen under the Firmament clan. Their voices came out from their mouths, and the void in all directions started to vibrate violently. An aura that seemed to have come from ancient times instantly shrouded the 9 of them. Roar! The bodies of the 9 people started to disintegrate at a speed visible to the naked eye. What replaced them were giant beasts that stepped on the void. Each of the giant beasts looked like a giant dragon. The 9 godly beasts stood behind Long Chen and roared continuously. There were even rays of light that fell like a waterfall. The 9 godly beast fighting souls broke through the void and rushed toward Hanshuzi. Rumble! The golden flames in the sky stopped abruptly, and the golden crow shadows started to dissipate. Hanshuzi was completely engulfed by the 9 godly beast fighting souls. The eyes of the giant dragon Long Chen were filled with murderous intent. Then, he looked at the demonic clone and said coldly, "Do it." The demonic clone instantly turned into a sky full of demonic energy and entered the giant dragon's body. The dragon essence in Long Chen's body started to increase at a speed visible to the naked eye. Under everyone's gaze, a deafening roar came from his giant dragon's body. His cultivation base began to rise at a frightening speed. 5th level of the heaven-reaching realm. 6th level of the heaven-reaching realm. 7th level of the heaven-reaching realm. 8th level of the heaven-reaching realm. 9th level of the heaven-reaching realm. The 10th level of the heaven ascension realm. Everyone's eyes widened. With Long Chen's giant dragon body as the center, a boundless storm rose within tens of thousands of miles. Above the firmament, the weather changed. For a moment, the daytime was covered by dark clouds, and the sky was filled with thunder. The fusion of the 2 heaven ascension realm bodies allowed him to reach the peak of the heaven ascension realm. Countless heavenly tribulations fell on him like raindrops. The immortal weapon in Long Chen's hand streaked across the sky, and an invisible sword light swept out and covered the sky. Void Sword Art, Void Sword Soul Slash. As his voice fell, the ground cracked for tens of thousands of miles, and the gully turned into an abyss. The invisible sword light fell toward Hanshuzi in an instant. Countless heavenly tribulations and thunderbolts were attracted by the sword and blasted toward Hanshuzi. The 9 godly beast fighting souls flew backward. Hanshuzi's expression finally changed, and he was no longer as calm as before. Countless attacks fell, and the giant dragon that Hanshuzi had transformed into was instantly submerged in the sword light and thunderbolts. The entire first heaven seemed to be shaking violently. The heavenly mountain that was originally under the guidance of the first heaven had turned into an abyss that was tens of thousands of miles deep. Countless sovereigns stood in the sky, and those below the sovereigns fell into the abyss, their lives uncertain. Under the aftermath, even the sovereigns' faces were pale, and their cultivations were in chaos. They could no longer fight. Countless heavenly tribulations continued to bombard Hanshuzi in the abyss, and it lasted for close to 100 breaths. When the heavenly tribulations dissipated, the entire world seemed to have calmed down. Countless lightning bolts filled the abyss, and the entire heavenly mountain turned into a sea of lightning. Huff! Huff! Long Chen's giant dragon body seemed to have lost all its strength, and he fell from the sky. The 9 godly beast-fighting souls stood around him like protectors. Puff! Puff! Long Chen's body was bleeding profusely, and he stared at the abyss through the sea of lightning. He roared, "Nether King, what are you waiting for? I want to see his divine soul shatter with my own eyes." Not a single trace is left. The Nether King stood behind Long Chen, and he was stunned by the scene in front of him. It was as if he had lost his soul. Chapter 730. The Nether King's heart trembled and he didn't dare to be careless. He knew that Long Chen no longer had any power to fight. If Han Shuzi was still alive, as long as he had the strength to breathe, it would be the end for the two of them. The Nether King turned into a ray of light and rushed into the center of the thunder abyss. Buzz! However, the moment he entered the sea of tears, a giant hand instantly grabbed his throat. Han Shuzi soared into the air from within. But now, his entire divine soul was on the verge of collapsing. Only his head and right arm remained on his chest. Body of the Great Emperor, Primal Chaos Golden Codex. I, Han Shuzi, will not die here. I have waited for countless years. Finally, I have a chance to return to the God world. I should be the one who got the Primal Chaos Golden Codex and escaped the catastrophe. The corpse world will never bury me. Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, the body of the Nether King, which was like a Buddha statue, was instantly crushed by him. Even his divine soul was completely destroyed. A reaching heaven realm was killed by him. Divine skill, Nirvana burial. Buzz! As Han Shuzi shouted, the radiance around him began to dim. A power that didn't belong to the 10 directions celestial domain gathered in front of him. This power surrounded the spear made of starlight. Its target was Long Chen. Before the spear could strike, the surrounding space was shattered. The entire sky was like a piece of paper that was cut clean. Long Chen looked at the spear and he seemed to have lost all his strength. He had prepared so many backup plans for this battle. However, he now understood that Han Shuzi wasn't from the 10 directions celestial domain. He was from the so-called God world. Seeing that the spear was about to land, Long Chen laughed crazily. He stood straight and pointed his sword at Han Shuzi. He looked like he was about to die. Jianshi San, Qing Xian, and the other godly generals looked like they were going to die. They rushed toward Long Chen and tried to block him. However, under this terrifying spear, they couldn't move at all. It was as if their godly souls would be destroyed if they got close. Only the 9 divine beast war souls roared again. With our divine beast bloodline, we will help our Lord ascend to the 9th Dharmakaya of the heavenly dragon veins, the world-destroying ancestral dragon. With the blood of our divine beasts as a sacrifice, we welcome the ancestral dragon of the heavens clan. The 9 mythological beast-fighting souls completely disappeared between heaven and earth, and streams of almost tangible bloodline power crazily rushed into Long Chen's body. At this moment, Han Shuzi was no longer as calm as before. Before the spear could fully materialize, he threw it at Long Chen. At this moment, even space seemed to have stopped. Everyone stared at Long Chen in the spear, but no matter how fast Long Chen broke through, he could not be faster than this spear that did not belong to the 10 directions sky domain. However, just as everyone was unable to move, a beautiful figure actually descended from the sky. 7-colored divine light flickered around her body. She looked like a celestial being that had been banished to the mortal world. She was cold, proud, and otherworldly. She actually landed right in front of Long Chen. The long spear instantly pierced through her body and shattered her divine soul. However, her eyes were still fixed on Long Chen, and there was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth. She said, "In the end, I still have to rely on the body of 1,000 extremes, the body of 7 extremes." No, no! At this moment, Long Chen's eyes were almost filled with tears of blood. The moment he saw Yi Hailan, he went crazy. "I won't allow you to die. Even if I have to search the entire world and slaughter all living things, I will never let you die because of me again." He directly covered the light of Yi Hailan's divine soul with a mouthful of dragon vitality in his mouth. At this moment, the power in his body actually transformed into devil chi. Long Chen actually started to turn into a devil at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. At the same time, his giant dragon body actually completely transformed into the ancestral dragon. "In the name of the ancestral dragon of the Heavens clan, I call upon the heavenly Tao to destroy you." Buzz. As Long Chen's voice fell, the long spear that was 3 inches in front of him started to shatter. The space in all directions seemed to be suppressed by the heavenly Tao's power. At this moment, everyone's divine soul was on the verge of shattering. They only felt that the entire 10 directions celestial domain was collapsing. This strange power seemed to affect every space in the entire 10 directions celestial domain. Bang, bang, bang. Apart from the long spear, the power that did not belong to the 10 directions celestial domain also shattered. "No, no, Dizun, save me, bang." Han Shuzi's broken divine soul seemed to be crushed by the surrounding space. However, the Dizun that he spoke of did not appear. Perhaps even Han Shuzi did not know. The Heaven's Dragon Vein originated from the chaotic Golden Codex. Long Chen's giant dragon body seemed to be unable to withstand some kind of violent power. In an instant, he had already turned into a human. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his physical body actually shattered inch by inch. His divine soul fell to the ground just like that. Divine soul? Perhaps it could no longer be called a divine soul. Long Chen's entire divine soul was as black as ink, emitting a terrifying devil chi. This was a devil soul. He had completely turned into a devil soul. However, he still held 2 dazzling rays of divine light in his hands. In one hand, there were 9 divine beast origins. In the other hand, there was only a crystal formed by a wisp of dragon essence. It was filled with countless rays of light. Qing Xian immediately rushed to Long Chen. She could even feel Yi Hailan's faint aura. She could not help but tremble. Her face was already covered in tears. She was the one who brought Yi Hailan here. She even remembered how Yi Hailan stopped the 9-leaf sailboat in the 10th heaven. However, she was clearly only at the peak of the heaven immortal realm. She also said that she would not participate in the battle. At the last moment, she saved Long Chen. Qing Xian looked at the dragon essence in Long Chen's right hand and hugged Long Chen's divine soul tightly in her arms. She murmured in a daze, "I'll take you home, take you home." Qing Xian waved her hand and took out a 9-leaf sailboat. Then, she carried Long Chen's divine soul and flew away, disappearing into the void. In an unknown place. A stalwart man with countless images flashed through his eyes before disappearing without a trace. Then, his face was full of excitement. He stared at the iron cage in front of him and couldn't help but walk back and forth. The iron cage was engraved with dense divine runes. If someone could count them, they would know that there were a total of 180 million divine runes. If Long Chen looked at them, he would not be able to recognize any of them, let alone imprint them. There were no birds or beasts in the iron cage. There was only a heart in it. However, the heart continued to beat within the cage, as if it had a life of its own, as it continued to pound against the cage. After so many times, am I finally going to succeed? Tisk tsk, maybe I am the first person to gain something from the corpse world. He was the sovereign that Han Shuzi had mentioned. However, he did not care about Han Shuzi's life at all. Chapter 731. First Heaven, Heavenly Mountain. After Long Chen left, countless experts broke out into a great battle. The rulers of the celestial palaces, especially, saw that Han Shuzi was dead and Long Chen was only left with his soul. They wanted to fight to the bitter end. They knew that once Long Chen recovered, even if he was only left with his soul, he would be an invincible Ascension realm expert in the 10 directions celestial domain. They were Long Chen's targets. Unfortunately, the battle had started in a grandiose manner and ended in a grandiose manner. The rulers of the major clans did not have the same momentum as the rulers of the celestial palaces. Before Long Chen could make a move, Jian Shan led many experts to suppress the rulers of the celestial palaces. Although the rulers of the celestial palaces were strong, there were only 6 of them. 4 of them escaped, and 3 died. All 3 were killed by Jian Shan. After Long Chen's death, his disciple, Jian Shan, walked into everyone's sight and became the Imperial Academy's disciple. After Long Chen entered the Ascension realm, Jian Shan became the strongest person under the Ascension realm. Jian Shan frowned as he gazed at the vast expanse of devils, and then he looked at the devil overlords and said in a low voice, "All of you, return to the ghost capital and wait for my master to return before we make a decision." Countless demon clan experts looked at each other, but there was also greed in their eyes. To them, although the 10 Directions celestial domain had no demonic energy, it was definitely a fertile land. However, many of them chose to retreat in the end. Although Long Chen had left, he was still alive. Not a single one of them had the confidence to be able to kill Sword 13. At that time, his shocking sword strike that tore through the sky was truly too shocking. Among the demons, a 6th Dao realm expert walked out of the crowd. He looked at Jian Shan, then subconsciously glanced at the endless abyss below. He said, "Now that the Nether King is dead, Shadow Demon is Long Chen. If he wakes up, please send my regards, and don't forget what he promised us." Jian Shan frowned and nodded. After all, the devil race was brought here by Long Chen and the Nether King. He did not have the intention to make things difficult for them. Seeing Jian Shan nod, the devil race people retreated one after another, heading towards the ghost city. Countless people began to retreat. Only the people from the Imperial College remained where they were. Everyone had a recording item in their hands. One of them even left with Jian Shan. Peace returned to the various regions. In the entire 10 Directions heaven domain, Long Chen's name was like the sun in the sky. With the death of the transcending ruler, Long Chen naturally became the strongest powerhouse in the 10th heaven. The various heavenly domain deity statues collapsed, but not a single ancient race dared to fight for them. Everyone was waiting for Long Chen's news. Although his physical body had been destroyed, his spirit was still alive. Thus, no one dared to stir up trouble again. Time passed quickly. With the death of the Transcendent Sovereign, the members of the Celestial Palace who had followed the Transcendent Sovereign fled like rats. The 10th heaven. In a short month, the power of the deity statues reached its peak. Countless young powerhouses came from the other 9 regions. Outside the 10th heaven, Jian Shan stood at the top of the Celestial Palace. He turned into a sword spirit and stayed there day and night. Over the past month, people from various heavens came to pay their respects. Many ancient race members who had followed the rulers of the various celestial palaces sent gifts, but their hearts were uneasy. Of course, the 10th heaven experienced nearly 10 sneak attacks from the rulers of the celestial palace who had escaped. However, after one of the attackers died, no one else came. Inside the palace, a godlike spirit slowly walked out. This person was Long Chen. However, his spirit was covered in demonic aura. His eyes were like the flames of the underworld. It was breathtaking. Qing Xian followed behind Long Chen, not saying a word. The moment the divine soul walked out of the inner hall, countless pairs of eyes from all directions turned to look at it. Greetings to the firmament ruler. Greetings to the firmament ruler. Greetings to the firmament ruler. Whether it was the rulers or the people from various regions who came to pay their respects, they all knelt on one knee. Their faces were respectful and fearful. Jian Shan walked down from the top of the 10th heaven for the first time. He came in front of Long Chen. Looking at Long Chen's fiery eyes, he felt endless emptiness. He said in a low voice, "Master, my condolences." Long Chen suddenly stopped and looked at Jian Shan. A majestic aura uncontrollably fell on Jian Shan. Jian Shan's face suddenly turned pale. The sword aura around him was about to collapse. Long Chen's voice was as cold as ice. From today onwards, no one can speak of the Avacania realm. I don't need to mourn for what happened that day. Jian Shirshan sighed and nodded. However, he felt Long Chen's sorrow in his heart. No words were spoken. However, Yi Hailan was still dead in the end. Long Chen walked step by step from the heaven toward the statue he once stood in front of. His spirit seemed to be surrounded by demonic flames. His entire person was like a person who walked out of ink. With every step he took, the people around him lowered their heads. No one dared to look directly at Long Chen. He walked for a full hour. The crowd knelt and opened up a path. They watched Long Chen standing in front of the statue. "Sword, come," Long Chen whispered. An immortal weapon fell from the sky and landed in front of him. As the sun set, he began to dance with his sword. His sword danced faster and faster, but there was no trace of killing intent. Qing Xian followed closely behind. Her eyes were filled with heartache. She waved her hand and signaled for everyone to leave. One by one, the experts knelt and left the area thousands of miles around the statue. However, they were unwilling to leave. Everyone stared at Long Chen. It was as if Long Chen's sword dance contained endless opportunities. When he danced with his sword, the sun and moon alternated. Day after day, year after year. A demonic figure danced with his sword for 3 years. This was because nearly 20% of the people who danced with his sword were almost as strong as the Yin-Yang sovereigns. However, in the second year, no one dared to watch Long Chen's sword dance. Those who practiced his sword all suffered from qi deviation and their spirits collapsed. On a certain day in the third year, Long Chen stopped his sword dance at sunset. Flesh and blood seemed to be reborn under the flames of his spirit. A white-haired man stood proudly between the heavens and the earth. He looked at the towering statue in front of him and murmured, "Those who do not come back to life will have endless white hair. They will never enter the immortal sect in this lifetime." When he finished speaking, his right hand slammed down on the statue. The statue, which bore endless inscriptions of creation, suddenly collapsed. The immortal power of creation transformed into a pure ice coffin. Only rays of light flowed within the ice coffin. It was as if a peerlessly beautiful woman was dancing with her sword. Above the ruins, the statue disappeared, but a demonic statue rose from the ground. Long Chen turned around and looked at Jian Shirshan and Qing Xian, who had been accompanying him all this time. He said, 13, take my immortal weapon and kill all those who followed the sovereign that day. Jian Shirshan was startled. However, he did not raise his hand to take Long Chen's immortal weapon. There were too many people who participated in the battle that day. If they were all killed, there would be very few experts left in the 10 heavens. The onlookers felt a chill run down their spines. Long Chen's words were likely enough to massacre many of the major clans in the 10 heavens. Seeing that Jian Shirshan did not move, Long Chen said coldly again, take my sword and kill. Before Jian Shirshan could speak. Chapter 732. A way to save her? Qing Xuan's simple words caused Long Chen to be rooted to the ground in a daze. His cold and evil demonic aura began to recede. But was there really a way to save her in this world? Reverse reincarnation. This was the only way Long Chen could think of. Unfortunately, even he didn't know how to use the Primal Chaos Golden Codex to do this. He felt Qing Xuan's gaze on him. Her bright and fragile eyes were like the spring rain falling on him. Long Chen's right hand froze in the air. His eyes also began to clear when he looked at Qing Xian. A moment later, he took a deep breath and turned to Jian Shirshan. Take the sword. Only kill those who deserve to be killed. Jian Shirshan took the immortal weapon and flew away. The sword spirit woman appeared at his side without a word. After Jian Shirshan left, Qing Xian pulled Long Chen and asked softly, how do you want to save her? Long Chen operated the Primal Chaos Golden Codex. A beam of divine light was enough to restore his mother's spirit and rebuild her body. But when he wanted to save Yi Hailan, he couldn't do it. Yi Hailan didn't even leave behind a trace of her spirit except for the last trace of essence that was about to dissipate. Long Chen was silent for a moment. The primal chaos golden codex can reverse reincarnation and change heaven and earth, he said. I don't know much about its mysteries. Perhaps it's not that it can't rebuild a person with its essence, but that I'm too weak. Too weak? When Long Chen said this, the guards around the heavenly palace couldn't help but reveal strange expressions. Long Chen was now at the peak of the heavenly ascension realm. It could be said that in the entire 10 directions heavenly domain, his words were the will of heaven. No one could change his mind. Dao Vindication, Great Emperor. Qing Xian looked at Long Chen, her eyes gentle. Then I'll go with you to find the Dao of the Great Emperor. She didn't know where Long Chen was going. But he knew that no matter where Long Chen went, she should follow him. For the past few days, she had been by Long Chen's side day and night. She knew better than anyone that Long Chen was very unstable at the moment. If it weren't for the strange dragon palace and the primal chaos golden codex in his divine soul, he would have been completely possessed and wouldn't be so sane. These two items were like candlelight in the dark night, illuminating his soul and stabilizing his sea of consciousness. Long Chen nodded and said, I don't know how to become a great emperor. It's a path that no one knows. However, there is one place that has traces of the great emperor realm. Qing Xian did not ask any questions. He followed Long Chen into the depths of the void on the 9-leaf sailboat. The 9-leaf sailboat sailed through the vast starry sky. Countless astral winds were blocked outside. Long Chen stood in front of the ship and seemed to be looking into the distance. After traveling for less than an hour, he muttered, There's something strange about this place. Qing Xian hurriedly followed Long Chen's gaze and looked into the distance. He saw light the size of a grain of rice. It became more and more dazzling and larger as they approached. Qing Xian subconsciously asked, Why is there a mountain in the void? Is it not afraid of the astral winds? Long Chen seemed to be in a daze as he said, This is the Eternal Origin Mountain. The Eternal Origin Mountain. Long Chen and Yi Hailan had once cultivated their origin techniques here and had almost lost their lives. The reason he had returned here was because of the underground palace that he had seen at the bottom of the Eternal Origin Mountain. Back then, he had seen with his own eyes that the strange flames in the vast underground palace were merely wick lamps. He took a quick glance. Even now, when he thought about it, he felt that a palace that could be built on the Eternal Origin Mountain required great power. Even Long Chen did not have the confidence to build such an underground palace in this place. As the two approached on the 9-leaf sailboat, the underground palace grew larger and larger. An ancient aura assaulted his senses. The entire underground palace and Eternal Origin Mountain appeared before the eyes of Long Chen and Qing Xian. They looked up. It was like a giant black tortoise with the Eternal Origin Mountain as its shell and the underground palace beneath it. The two of them didn't say anything else. Both of them looked rather solemn. The 9-leaf sailboat sailed into an entrance of the underground palace and suddenly emitted thunderous booms. Long Chen frowned. Countless rays of light flowed around him as he brought Qing Xian under the walls of the underground palace. The astral winds in the surroundings whistled 100 meters behind them like the roars of giant beasts but could not advance an inch. The two of them raised their heads to look, and both of them took in a deep breath of cold air. The entire underground palace was the foundation of the Eternal Origin Mountain. It was extremely vast and was probably close to 100,000 kilometers wide. The most terrifying thing was the inscription formations on it. The entire underground palace was made of tungsten and iron. The inscriptions were like the carvings of mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas. There were also images of divine beasts galloping about. Every one of them seemed to contain unfathomable power. Creak! Creak! The two's tense heartstrings could not help but be startled. They subconsciously looked in the direction of the sound. Long Chen's demonic aura was even stronger. He was ready to attack. For some reason. Although he was now at the peak of the heavenly arrival realm, he still felt that this place was extremely dangerous. He looked over and saw that the sound came from a door at the bottom of the carvings in front of them. The door suddenly opened and the thick stone door made an ear-piercing sound of friction. Longchen walked forward slowly. Qing Xian followed closely behind. The entire underground palace was brightly lit. All kinds of strange flames jumped above the lights. There were tens of thousands of them, stretching into the depths of the underground palace like stars in the sky. Longchen frowned. If so many strange flames attacked at the same time, even he would have to retreat. With a wave of his hand, the strange flame beast appeared in front of him. Ever since he defeated Han Shuzi, the strange flame beast had returned from the ancient planet. The experts on the ancient planet seemed to have recognized the relationship between Longchen and the strange flame beast. The strange flame beast had just appeared. Its face was full of excitement. However, its eyes suddenly became fierce. It stared at a spot under the light. It was an orange strange flame. It was less than 1,000 meters away from Longchen and the others. Longchen frowned. The demonic aura in his hand turned into a long rainbow and blasted out. Puff! Before the attack arrived, the orange strange flame suddenly scattered and swallowed the attack. The strange flame that was originally like a flame turned into a few feet tall. A human figure slowly walked out from it. As soon as the person walked out, the tens of thousands of strange flames surged up and cheered like children. For a moment, the temperature in the underground palace increased rapidly. It was bright as far as the eye could see. Interesting, interesting. I like this strange flame beast very much. A charming voice came out from the person's mouth. It was a tall woman. Her facial features were beautiful. However, she did not have hair. Instead, she had strands of flame draped behind her. Chapter 733. People who came out of the corpse world. It was a simple sentence, but the information it contained shocked Longchen and Qing Xian. How many people were there in this underground palace? Were they waiting for Longchen, or were they waiting for all the people who came out of the corpse world? The corpse world. Longchen had heard these 3 words many times. According to Han Shuzi, the 10 directions celestial territory was the corpse world, and so was the space above the sword pool. How many more corpse worlds were there? What was the so-called corpse world? Countless questions filled Longchen's heart. It was as if a hand was constantly reaching out to grab him, wanting to hold him tightly in its grasp. He stared at the woman who was surrounded by strange fire and asked in a low voice, "Why are you waiting for me here? How did you know I would come? What is the corpse world? Come with me." The woman sighed when she saw Longchen's appearance, then walked directly into the depths of the underground palace. As Longchen was about to take a step, Qing Xian pulled him back. Her eyes were full of worry, just like that day in the Fire Cloud Mountains. Although she did not have Longchen's cultivation, she also felt that the underground palace was unfathomable. Longchen turned around and looked at Qing Xian. Before he spoke, Qing Xian said, "Go ahead. Be careful. I'll wait for you on the boat." Longchen and Qing Xian looked at each other, then nodded and followed the woman into the depths of the underground palace. Qing Xian was different from Yi Hailan. She was as gentle as water. Compared to the vast Tao, she was more willing to return to the Long family with Longchen many years ago, get married, have children, and be an ordinary woman. She was not a person who liked to cultivate and compete. But she knew that she was willing to follow Longchen's footsteps. Yi Hailan was the opposite. Her heart was higher than the sky and as cold as ice. She had Longchen in her heart and understood Longchen even more, but she was unwilling to compete with any other woman. In her previous life, she was known as a fleeting red spider lily. Wasn't she the same in this life? Perhaps she had no regrets in this life. Looking at the back of Longchen, Qing Xian stood on the sailboat and waited. She always watched Longchen leave and waited for Longchen to return. The door to the underground palace slowly closed. Longchen's figure disappeared from the underground palace. Inside the underground palace, Longchen followed closely behind the woman, never letting his guard down. He didn't say much to Qing Xian, but his heart was already in turmoil. This woman's cultivation was definitely not inferior to his. In the underground palace, he tossed and turned. Wherever they passed, there were killing formations everywhere. Without a woman leading the way, Long Chen would find it difficult to move. After about 4 hours, the two of them finally stopped. Long Chen looked around vigilantly. Under the light of the lantern, there were 11 openings on the walls in all directions. And the two of them walked out from one of the openings. Long Chen was just about to ask when he saw figures flickering in the firelight from the other openings. 10 people, including Long Chen, walked out from the 11 openings. There were 10 people in total. Almost at the same time, their eyes fell on Long Chen. Long Chen scanned each of them with his divine consciousness in an instant. These people were all in the great completeness of the reaching heaven state. Finally, he fixed his gaze on a young man with long golden hair and a purple gold crown on his head. This person was extremely handsome. Even a woman like Yi Hailan would feel ashamed of her inferiority. There was a third eye between his eyebrows. That eye seemed to contain countless thunderbolts, making people's souls tremble. His lower body had no legs. It was actually a huge tail with green scales. But what shocked Long Chen was not his appearance and body, but his cultivation. He could clearly feel that this person's cultivation had surpassed the reaching heaven state. Surpassed the reaching heaven state? Great Emperor? Long Chen's voice trembled. He stared at this person and asked, "Are you in the Great Emperor realm?" Great Emperor. When Long Chen said this, the expressions of the people changed. An old man with white hair and beard standing beside the snake-tailed young man sighed and said, "Feng Shi was indeed the first one among us to reach the Great Emperor realm, in the past." Long Chen frowned slightly. He was about to say something, but the man called Feng Shi smiled and raised his hand to stop him. His voice was extremely gentle as he said softly, "Your thoughts are in vain. That woman used the body of 7 fatalities to transform into the power of 7 lives to block that spear for you. She was killed by the power of the God realm. Even if you reverse reincarnation, she will not appear in the corpse world." Plop. Long Chen's face suddenly became ferocious. The light in his eyes flickered between dark and bright as he kept retreating. When the 10 people around saw Long Chen's appearance, they all shook their heads and sighed. It was as if they couldn't bear to see him like this. Some of them even had a look of reminiscence and struggle in their eyes. "The suffering of the world is just a drop in the ocean," Feng Shi whispered, but there was a hint of compassion in his voice. Light flowed in his hand, and it was crystal clear. When the light fell on Long Chen's body, it almost dispersed the demonic aura around him and calmed his soul. Rumble. The demonic aura around Long Chen suddenly shook, shaking off the pure energy. He stared at Feng Shi and said in a deep voice, "If I can't save her in the corpse world, I will rush into the God realm and slaughter the sovereigns that Han Suzi mentioned." The people around were silent. Feng Shi's eyes were filled with compassion. He stared at Long Chen for a long time before muttering, "God realm? I'm afraid the sovereigns won't be able to reconstruct her soul and body. However, if you obtain the position of Realm Lord, there may be a glimmer of hope." Realm Lord? When Long Chen heard this, his eyes lit up like raging flames. He didn't know what realm a Realm Lord was, and he didn't know what the position of Realm Lord was. However, he saw the hope of saving Yi Hailan. That was enough. "Bai Shuzi, bring him to see everything he wants to know," Feng Shi said. The white-bearded old man beside him brought Long Chen to one of the gaps. Seeing the two disappear in the reflection of the flames, the people in front of Feng Shi all walked forward. A few of them even said self-deprecatingly, "Why didn't you use the words Realm Lord to deceive us back then?" Realm Lord? You really dared to say that? You gave him such a big pie that he will never be able to eat. Don't talk so much. We have reached this point. Which one of us isn't alone? Feng Shi remained calm. He looked at Long Chen's departing figure and muttered to himself, "He is different from you. You hate him, but his 2 lives have already become his obsession. His heart is dripping blood. Moreover, I didn't lie to him. A realm lord's 5 viscera and 6 bowels can become 11 corpse worlds and create countless lives. Since she is one of those lives, if she reaches the position of realm lord, she may have a chance of survival. Hearing Feng Shi's serious reply, the people around him couldn't help but smile bitterly. They could only shake their heads. Chapter 734. Inside the underground palace, there was a spacious area. Long Chen and the old man Bai Shuzi stood side by side. In front of them, there were many huge illusions alternating. The illusions were filled with light and shadows, and there were a total of 11 different places. One of them was the 10 regions, and the other 10 were completely different. One of the illusions was a land of raging flames, and the people there all cultivated fire. Every one of them had fire patterns carved on their bodies, and they were very similar to the woman with the strange flame. The other world was filled with sword cultivators. Every one of them was born from the void, and they were born as sword spirits without a body. They were almost the same as Jian Shan. There was also a place filled with a kind of strange demon race, and they were ever-changing. These 11 illusions were 11 spaces that were similar to the 10 regions. Long Chen also clearly discovered that the other 9 people, including himself, had all come from the various spaces in front of him except for Feng Shi. Long Chen couldn't help but ask Bai Shuzi, why isn't Feng Shi among them? Bai Shuzi seemed to know that Long Chen would ask this question, and replied without hesitation, because he is from the God realm, and he is also the master of a corpse world. He was also once an Emperor realm expert. He is also the only one who entered the corpse world and found part of the realm lord's inheritance. The realm lord's inheritance. This time, Bai Shuzi didn't wait for Long Chen to ask any more questions, and started to explain. The 11 corpse worlds were all formed from the internal organs of the realm lord. The realm lord was the most powerful existence in the 9 god realms. His body had become a god, and he could transform into anything in the world. He could pick the stars with his hands, grab the sun and moon with his palms, and control countless living beings in the god realm. The internal organs could transform into different spaces, and they could form a world of their own. In the eyes of Long Chen and the others, the internal organs transforming into a world was extremely strange and unimaginable. However, in the eyes of the people of the god realm, it was too ordinary. The power of the realm lord was not something they could imagine. Even the emperors could only see a little of it. As for this, Bai Shuzi even told Long Chen about the realms after the heaven-reaching realm. And the strength of the people of the god realm. After the heaven-reaching realm was the emperor realm. However, the great emperor realm was not the end. Great emperor, monarch, venerable emperor, deity king, deity emperor, god emperor, titled emperor lord. The names of these realms were not only a division of strength, but also a division of status. At the very least, they now knew that there were thousands of venerable sovereigns under a divine king, and each of them controlled a world. The venerable sovereign had 10,000 imperial emperors under him, and under the imperial emperors, there were 100,000 great emperors. The god world they were in was called the ancient sacred god world. The title of Sector Lord was Ancient Saint Emperor Lord. This piece of news was like a bolt from the blue in Long Chen's ears. His breathing was already disordered. Were they just creatures created from the space created by someone else's corpse? For a moment, he felt dizzy and his lips were dry. After a long while, he said in a low voice, "Then what are we? The Realm Master's corpse is already dead, so how did it fall into the hands of the great emperors? If we calculate according to the time flow in your space, the Realm Lord has already been dead for 1,000,000 years." Qing Xian was on the 9-leaf sailboat outside the underground palace. They waited for a year. When Long Chen walked out, he looked as if he had lost his soul. In this year, he had heard too much, and even he felt like he was in a dream. Whether it was the death of the Realm Master or the chaos in the ancient sacred god world. Countless experts had broken free from their control, and those below the Realm Master stood alone. The ancient Saint Emperor Lord's body had been divided among countless people, and his internal organs were nowhere to be found. In fact, they had fallen into the hands of 11 venerable sovereigns. the two of them steered the nine-leaf sailboat away from the Eternal Origin Mountain. Qing Xian did not ask any questions, as she was waiting for Long Chen to speak. When the nine-leaf sailboat sailed out of the void and returned to the 10 directions celestial domain, he said to Qing Xian, "I'll bring you to see the heaven-supporting tree in the savage forbidden zone." Qing Xian nodded and leaned against Long Chen. The nine-leaf sailboat sailed directly into the savage forbidden zone. Long Chen's body was surrounded by boundless mighty energy, and he broke free from the laws of the savage forbidden zone. When Qing Xian saw the cage-like place, she was shocked. She even wanted to ask Long Chen what kind of space was in the endless darkness outside the divine tree, and what was inside. Long Chen replied half-jokingly, "Maybe there's someone outside who has a few dogs that can fly," and put a piece of meat in the cage. Without waiting for Qing Xian to reply, Long Chen steered the nine-leaf sailboat and flew away. His eyes took a deep look at the gods and devils tied to the divine tree. Then, Long Chen went to the Imperial Academy, and then to the Sword Pond. Finally, he returned to the 10th heaven. Jianshi San was already waiting for him in the Heavenly Palace, and the Heavenly Palace rulers who had followed Han Shuzi had all been killed. In the 10 directions celestial domain, Long Chen had already become a venerable. The various heavens began to build statues of gods, all in the image of Long Chen. Long Chen didn't seem to care about it at all. In the following days, Long Chen didn't leave the 10th heaven. He and Qing Xian also stayed in the Long family's residence every day. Until one day, he found Jianshi San and said, "You care about the sword Dao, and no one in the 10 directions celestial domain can surpass you. I want to ask you something." "Master, please ask." Jianshi San replied. "Are you willing to improve your sword Dao, but your life may be in danger?" Long Chen's voice was unprecedentedly solemn. But as soon as his voice fell, Jianshi San didn't hesitate and directly said, "Master should know 13's answer. 13 is the sword Dao. If I don't die, my sword Dao is boundless. If I can improve my sword Dao, what's there to fear even if I die?" Long Chen looked at Jianshi San, shook his head, and laughed. Then he waved his right hand, and the immortal weapon was already in front of Jianshi San. Black light lingered on his right hand, and countless divine souls swept over it, directly erasing the imprint on the immortal weapon. He said to Jianshi San, "This sword is yours from now on." The guards around the heavenly palace were all shocked when they saw Long Chen's action. This was an immortal weapon. The only immortal weapon in the current generation of the 10 directions celestial domain, but now he was going to give it to Jianshi San. Jianshi San was about to refuse, but Long Chen continued, "This woman and the sword has many ties with you, and your sword Dao has actually surpassed mine. This sword should be given to you. Maybe I shouldn't use a sword in the future. I'm not a person who is obsessed with the sword Dao." After that, Long Chen didn't give Jianshi San a chance to speak. He ordered, "Go and summon everyone to the heavenly palace." "Who?" Jianshi San asked without thinking. Everyone you don't think should die," Long Chen said in a low voice. Chapter 735. Ever since Han Shuzi's death, the 10th heaven has become a gathering place for powerhouses from all over the 10 heavens. Everything seemed to have returned to its former calm. Spring came and autumn went. Year after year, more and more people came to the 10th heaven. The entire Yan nation also came, and there were many people who had interacted with Long Chen before. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye, but Jianshi San was still going back and forth between the heavens. Finally, in the 5th year, he stopped. He met Long Chen again. Long Chen looked at Jianshi San's appearance and asked, "Is it over?" "The number of people in the 10th heaven has increased by several times." Jianshi San shook his head and said solemnly, "There are too many. Everyone in this world should be alive. Everyone should be alive." Long Chen waved his hand, and a pot of strong wine appeared in his hand. His hands were actually trembling a little. He murmured, "But they all have to die. Even you and I may not be able to live." Jianshi San still didn't understand Long Chen's words. He couldn't even think of who could kill so many people. The two stopped talking and began to drink. Before the wine was finished, Longchen took Jianshi to the sword pond on the 9-leaf sailboat. I hope that the next time I see you, you will already know everything. Remember, the thing you are looking for is called the Sword Path Divine Codex. It can help you enter the Great Emperor realm. Longchen watched as Jianshi turned into a sword spirit and passed through the barrier under the sword pond, disappearing into the distance. He turned around and left. A deep sense of powerlessness enveloped him. According to Feng Shi, once Longchen reached the Great Emperor realm, the catastrophe of the 10 heavens would come. This calamity would destroy everything in the corpse world. And the source was the human Tao Emperor in the divine world who held the heart of the realm lord. Even if he never entered the Great Emperor realm, the catastrophe would still come. However, 100 people would be left behind until the next person who obtained the Primal Chaos Golden Codex stepped into the Great Emperor realm. This was the reason why the powerhouses of the immemorial, and ancient antiquity era disappeared. The endless cycles of reincarnation were all for the sake of finding the Primal Chaos Golden Codex. Longchen was undoubtedly the most likely person to become a great emperor. He had the body of a great emperor, a physique that should only appear in the God realm. The 11 corpse worlds contained the cultivation essence of the ancient Saint World Lord. His heart contained his sector lord level technique and bloodline. The kidney contained his entire life's inheritance of sword Tao cultivation. The spleen contained his will of fire. As long as he could obtain one of the 11 sovereigns, he would be able to mobilize a portion of the ancient sacred divine world's world origin and stand above countless powerhouses, winning a place for himself in the chaotic ancient sacred divine world. Once he stepped into the Great Emperor realm, the Emperor would be able to take him into the divine world. When Longchen returned to the 10th heaven, life returned to normal. A deep sense of powerlessness enveloped him. He could not do anything. He could only wait for someone from the sword world to reach the final step. Only then could Feng Shi's final plan be carried out. 10 days later. Feng Shi's sad voice suddenly sounded in Longchen's mind. He knew that the time had come. The laws of the sword world were completely different from the 10 directions heaven, and the flow of time was naturally different. He did not ask Feng Shi if the person who walked out of the sword world was Jianshi. Jianshi had chosen this path, and it was a choice of life and death. When Longchen soared into the sky, the demonic flames around his body almost covered the entire sky of hundreds of thousands of meters. He wanted to step into the Great Emperor realm. Reaching the Great Emperor realm was like a legend to anyone in the 10 directions heaven. It was impossible to reach, and no one knew how to do it. However, Feng Shi had already told him the method to reach the Great Emperor realm. Of course, the method for the other 9 people to step into the Great Emperor realm was also arranged by him. Only Longchen's method was suitable for the Great Emperor body. Rumble, 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 rumble. Countless powerhouses soared into the sky from all directions of the 10th heaven, looking at Longchen from afar. Their eyes were filled with reverence, and everyone knelt down on one knee. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people. In Longchen's dantian, beams of colorful light shot out from his body. Then, they turned into countless threads and began to connect with the countless rules in the void. The green light fell into the mountain range, and the red light fell into the flaming volcano. Ancient sacred divine world. In the divine Crow Sea, where the human Tao Emperor was, his expression suddenly changed, and in the next moment, he disappeared from where he was. The surrounding imperial emperors looked at each other and discussed animatedly. Now that the divine Crow Sea and the divine volcano are irreconcilable, this battle is inevitable. How can the emperor leave now? Why can't he leave? The realm lord is no longer here, and those above the divine king realm are dividing the ancient sacred divine world's origin. Who will care about them? Although the divine world is in chaos now, countless emperors are leading the imperial emperors to rise. A few days ago, I heard that an emperor stepped into the divine king realm on the 9 continents Spirit Mountain, attracting nearly 1,000 emperors to join him and fight for the divine world's origin. World's origin? Some people who cultivate heavenly fate have already deduced that the one who can restore the ancient sacred divine world to its former glory is the one who obtains its inheritance. But now that his physical body has been completely destroyed in the battle of the world creation mountain, who can obtain his inheritance? Everyone discussed animatedly, but they also shook their heads and sighed. Once upon a time, the ancient sacred divine world was an existence that the 9 great divine worlds feared, but now the ancient sacred divine world was in chaos. If not for the great array left behind by the ancient sacred emperor, people from various realms would have seized the opportunity to come. Divine Crow Sea Inner Palace. The human Tao Emperor's eyes were filled with divine light as he stared at the cage that was hanging in his room. This room was strengthened by his divine power, and unless he died, no one could enter. The dense inscriptions on the cage began to flicker, and he could not help but show excitement on his face. He laughed loudly and said, "That person with the body of a great emperor is really going to become a great emperor. Once he becomes a great emperor, I will be able to sense his presence, and when the tide of divine power descends, the entire corpse world will be at its most turbulent moment." As soon as he finished speaking, the human Tao Emperor's right hand slammed down on the cage, and the entire cage began to rotate at an almost unobservable speed, setting off countless divine lights. A bright blue divine light bloomed from the human Tao Emperor's 2 fingers, and it was dazzling and magnificent. However, when the light landed on the heart, it instantly disappeared. The next moment, the heart that was almost withered began to beat at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the sound was deafening like a dragon awakening. In a short time, several years had passed in the 10 heavens. The flow of time in the divine world was ridiculously slow, and it was almost 1,000th of the corpse world. Among the 10 heavens, the 10th heaven was already empty. The entire 10th heaven was like a wilderness, but at this moment, the sky began to collapse, and a bright blue brilliance began to flow from the cracks in space. Chapter 736. The azure light of the tides seemed to come from all over the void. In the void, below the eternal origin mountain, the 11 of them looked at each other. The man standing next to Feng Shi was Jian Shan. At this moment, he looked a little older. His cultivation base had reached the peak of the Ascension realm. If he was an unsheathed blade before, then he was a simple and unadorned ancient sword now. Jian Shan had only left for 10 days in the 10 heavens domain. But in the sword world, he had experienced close to 100 years. Feng Shi looked at them and said, "Do you remember what I told you? Now that the 10 of you, including me, have all broken through to the Emperor realm at the same time, they will definitely launch a catastrophe at the same time. The 10 corpse worlds have collapsed at the same time. Only the world I control still exists. This is your only chance of survival." After that, he looked at Long Chen and then looked at Long Chen deeply. Long Chen had taken away almost all the people in the 10th heaven with the Dragon Palace. He knew that the other 9 had used various methods to save the people they couldn't abandon, but Long Chen was the one who did the most. All these years, he had created this body with soil and added all his spirit into it. It was extremely risky to enter the corpse world. He hid his cultivation base and stayed in the corpse world for 3,000 years before obtaining the Realm Lord's void inheritance. But he didn't choose to leave. Instead, he built the Eternal Origin Mountain and the Underground Palace to connect the world's origins. He wanted to save the people of the worlds. The Realm Lord's internal organs should have been his. Long Chen and the others were born from the Realm Lord's body and had the Realm Lord's bloodline. Only they could save the chaotic ancient sacred divine world. No one was in the mood to talk. Shadows flashed across the void in front of them. The azure tide was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, harvesting the living beings of the corpse world. No matter who it was, even the youngest baby was among them. This was the end of the world, a complete massacre. They clenched their fists tightly, and the veins on their faces couldn't help but twitch. Apart from the corpse world controlled by Feng Shi, 10 corpse worlds were annihilated at the same time. Attack! Seeing that the realms were on the verge of collapse, Feng Shi's third divine eye shone with countless beams of light. Every beam of light accurately landed on the formation inscriptions above the underground palace. The entire underground palace suddenly soared into the sky, galloping above the azure brilliance. The indestructible Origin Mountain began to disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye. It seemed to have become the power source of the underground palace's formation. Xin Wuhai's expression changed drastically. An invisible force came from the 9 heavens and blasted towards the cage in front of him. The goddess Hua Clan. Soul induction technique. The human Tao Emperor's face instantly darkened. But just as he was about to attack, he saw an underground palace suddenly connect with the soul summoning technique. The cage of inscriptions was smashed open in an instant. The underground palace turned into a rainbow and disappeared into the sky at the same time. The human Tao Emperor made a grabbing motion with his right hand, and countless rays of divine light from all directions transformed into a cage of heaven and earth. However, it still couldn't stop the soul attraction technique. The goddess Hua Clan, are you trying to make an enemy of the human Tao Emperor's bloodline? The human Tao Emperor's eyes were bloodshot as he roared. Although time passed quickly in the corpse world, he'd already invested too much energy in this matter in the God realm. He'd never imagined that the person who'd ascended to the great Emperor realm would be kidnapped by the soul induction technique. In contrast, the other 9 sovereign lands were also gloomy as they watched the crumbling corpse world. The person who held the inheritance had clearly reached the great Emperor realm. Why haven't I found any traces of him even though the entire corpse world has been destroyed? I've waited for him for so long. He finally became a great Emperor realm cultivator, enough to avoid the catastrophe. But where is he? Why is he missing? How can this be? The catastrophe this time completely destroyed the entire corpse world. Where is the person who inherited the inheritance? The goddess Hua Clan. One of the 1,000 sovereigns under the ethereal king's command. They were located in the North Foot territory. Ever since the death of their realm lord, they'd remained silent and never participated in any battles. A beam of light descended from the sky and charged into Goddess Hua's palace. Rumble. Inside Goddess Hua's palace, a quagmire suddenly emitted a blinding light. The soil scattered in all directions and was actually purplish gold in color. Beneath the soil was a huge internal organ. The palace above the organ floated continuously before collapsing inch by inch. Feng Shi shot out from within like a beam of golden light. Blood flowed continuously from his mouth as his body began to turn into soil at a speed visible to the naked eye. Immediately after, he waved his right hand, and Long Chen and the others appeared one after another. Whoosh! 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 Just as they landed, experts from Goddess Hua's clan flew over one after another. These people were like gods, and the light they emitted was as blinding as the sun. They were all sovereign emperors. The expressions of the sovereign emperors gradually changed when they saw Long Chen and the others. On the other side, Feng Shi's body had completely disappeared and was replaced by a godlike divine soul. As soon as Feng Shi's divine soul appeared, countless rays of divine power descended on him from all directions. In the blink of an eye, his divine soul had condensed into a physical body. He looked at Long Chen and the others and said, "Wait here for now. Although I've taken you away from the corpse world, I've offended 10 sovereigns at the same time." After Feng Shi finished speaking, he shook his head and left the quagmire with the other sovereign emperors. Long Chen and the others looked at each other, but they were also filled with admiration for Feng Shi. All of this seemed simple, but in reality, it required great perseverance and planning. Long Chen looked at Jian Shan and said in a deep voice, "I plan to leave, Feng Shi. Are you willing to come with me?" Jian Shan nodded and replied, "Of course. Life and death are up to fate." Long Chen and Jian Shan looked at each other, then turned into streaks of light and rushed out. Surprisingly, no one from Goddess Hua's clan stopped them. There were even a few sovereign emperors who nodded slightly with some admiration. The other 8 looked at Long Chen and Jian Shan's departing figures with some bitterness in their hearts, but they couldn't take a step forward. They knew Long Chen and Jian Shan's intentions. Feng Shi had already done his utmost by taking them away from the corpse world. If they continued to stay, it would definitely bring them endless trouble. But they didn't dare to leave. The scene of the corpse world's destruction and the waves of divine power had shocked them. In front of these sovereigns, they probably wouldn't be able to take a single blow. They only had feng shui to rely on. Chapter 737. Jian Shusan's voice was cold with a hint of sadness. They were all in the great emperor realm. Once there was a gap in their Tao heart, there was no possibility of further progress. Apart from the two of them, the other 8 people did not even have the courage to leave feng shui. How could they continue to cultivate? Perhaps the great emperor realm was their peak. Longchen stared at Jian Shusan and shook his head. They have waited for too long. The heavenly calamity unleashed by the venerable emperors not only defeated the various corpse worlds, but also destroyed their anger and determination. Jian Shusan nodded slightly, but he also knew the feeling of fear. They had experienced countless things and became the peak existence of each corpse world, but in the end, they were all destroyed by a single finger. After stepping into the ancient sacred divine world, they did not see a wider world, only endless danger. This sense of danger and insignificance had imperceptibly destroyed their hearts of cultivation. The two sighed and soon fell silent. In the vast divine world, the two of them did not know where to go. After traveling for 3 days and 3 nights, they finally stopped in a mountain. Only then did they stop in the middle of a mountain range. The two of them opened up a cave residence in the middle of the mountain range and rested there. Jian Shusan took out a pot of strong wine and filled Longchen's cup. He revealed a rare smile and said, "How many people did Master bring out of the 10 directions heaven domain?" "As many as I could. They are all in my Divine Soul Dragon Palace. The Divine Soul Dragon Palace and the Divine Mountain Secret Realm have been refined by me. They can only survive with the help of the spatial array inside." Jian Shusan laughed involuntarily. His tone was somewhat bleak as he replied, "I only brought 5 people. They are the only ones who are willing to leave the sword world. The real people of the sword world are really steel sword souls. They would rather break than submit, and I am only a person of the 10 directions heaven domain." Buzz buzz buzz. Longchen wanted to say something, but his body suddenly emitted bursts of light and an ear-piercing buzzing sound. Jian Shusan's eyes looked at Longchen for the 11th time. Because this strange sound came from Longchen's body. Longchen frowned. With a wave of his hand, a long steel appeared in front of him. There was a pool of blood on the steel, bright and glistening. Domain steel? In the 10 directions heavenly domain, even Han Shuzi couldn't peek into it. It was very strange. Therefore, when Longchen left, he took this item with him. The droplets of blood pulsed on the steel, attracting all the divine light scattered on the mountain. Such momentum made Longchen and Jian Shusan subconsciously take 2 steps back. Buzz buzz. The blood suddenly soared into the air and left the steel. In the next moment, it blasted towards Longchen. Ancient Saint Divine World, I am the Ancient Saint Emperor. The roaring roar resounded in Longchen's mind, causing the entire dragon palace to tremble. This roar was filled with unwillingness and anger. Longchen's consciousness subconsciously sank into his sea of consciousness. He saw that the pool of blood had turned into a blood man, condensing in the sky above the ancestral dragon palace. This small blood man was like a god, with a pair of blood-red eyes that looked down on the world. "Leave this place quickly, or your life will be in danger." The blood man's voice was like thunder, landing in Longchen's ears. Longchen frowned, his face darkening. This blood man had escaped directly into his Divine Soul Dragon Palace. One should know that there were countless people in the Dragon Palace. His parents were among those people. "If I kill you, your divine soul will be destroyed. If you don't leave now, both of us will die here." The blood man spoke again. Longchen snorted, his consciousness leaving his divine soul. He said to Jian Shusan in a deep voice, "Let's go, we can't stay here any longer." The two of them had just rested for a while, but now they were on the road to escape again. In a dozen breaths, the two of them had already flown tens of thousands of meters. rumble. But in the next moment, a vast force swept out behind them. A ray of light blasted the entire mountain range into powder, and a giant god descended from the sky. This god's face was ferocious, and it actually had 3 heads and 6 arms. The trident in its hand was constantly condensing light, and everything in its path was turned into powder. This giant god was tens of thousands of meters tall, and the divine light from its body was like a waterfall. Everything in its sight was turned into powder. Long Chen and Jian Shan felt a chill down their spines with just a glance. The central area of the place where the giant god bombarded was where they were at the beginning. Once they left, Long Chen and Jian Shan did not dare to stop until the several tens of thousands of giant gods had completely disappeared from their sight. Jian Shan couldn't help but ask Long Chen, "Master, in the past, each heavenly domain had a domain stele to teach Tao. Now that the blood is left, the entire domain stele has collapsed. Did the blood in your body have any strange movements?" The situation in front of them was too strange, and Jian Shan couldn't help but worry. The giant god's descent was most likely due to the appearance of the domain stele. Long Chen shook his head and said, "We'll talk about this later. Although the 2 of us left Feng Shi, we can't go on like this. The ancient sacred divine world is full of killing intent, and we know nothing about it." Long Chen's voice became softer and softer, and his eyes gradually became strange. Finally, he stared blankly at the sky. "That's Shu San." A scholarly-looking youth holding a paper, a brush, and a golden list actually pierced through the air above their heads. That direction was where the giant god was just now. The Imperial Academy. Long Chen remembered it clearly, especially this scholar named Shu San. When the Azure Heaven Dragon Vein appeared, it was Shu San who brought him to the Imperial Academy for the first time. How is this possible? Jian Shan followed Long Chen's gaze and was dumbstruck. The various corpse worlds were all destroyed, and the Imperial Academy was in the 10 Directions celestial domain. "Let's go, be careful and follow behind him," Long Chen said in a deep voice, but he turned back and followed behind Shu San. The scene in the Imperial Academy appeared in Long Chen's mind, the palace that stood on the river of time. The corpse world was the body of the realm lord. How many secrets did it have? The 2 of them stood on the mountain peak and looked at the front from afar. Shu San was actually holding a paper and a pen and running around the giant god. His speed was so fast that even the giant god couldn't hurt him at all. The 2 of them stood there in a daze, feeling that this scene was too inconceivable. In the 10 Directions celestial domain, the Imperial Academy could record in front of Hanshuzi without fear, but this was the ancient sacred divine world. This is formed by my universe source, and it can travel through the ages. As long as it's in the ancient sacred divine world, no one can match its speed. Just as Long Chen was puzzled, the disdainful voice sounded in his mind again. The law of universe. Chapter 739. The palace master of the Imperial Academy was eloquent and talked until noon of the next day. Everything he said was the secret of the 10 Directions celestial domain before the ancient times. Whether it was martial skills, cultivation techniques, divine beasts, or weapons, they were all at his fingertips. What surprised Long Chen the most was the information about the ancient sacred divine world. The palace master of the Imperial Academy had just arrived from the corpse world for a few days, but he seemed to have grasped a huge amount of information. However, when Long Chen turned around and looked outside, he saw countless youths holding purple gold brushes flying through the sky. He knew that all of this was not impossible. Long Chen saw that the palace master of the Imperial Academy had no intention of stopping, as if he wanted to tell Long Chen all the information worth showing off. Long Chen coughed lightly and teased, "If you continue talking, you'll lose a lot of money this time." However, the palace master did not seem to hear him at all and continued to talk non-stop. From this moment on, Long Chen knew why the Imperial Academy recorded everything in the world and had countless lists that covered everything. If it were not for these lists and countless disciples, the palace master would not have so many things to talk about and show off in front of Long Chen. In the ancient times, nearly 50% of the people in the world were able to reach the heaven-piercing realm, and countless divine beasts were able to reach the heaven-piercing realm. Now that I think about it, that was probably the time when the bloodline of the Realm Lord was still strong. Why did the catastrophe of the 10 Directions celestial domain appear, and why did the sword Tao suddenly flourish in the ancient times? News after news kept ringing in his ears. A trace of blood seemed to have appeared at the corner of the Imperial Academy's palace master's mouth before he stopped. Longchen shook his head and laughed. "You've said so much, but you've forgotten your name." "I still don't know your name, Palace Master." The Palace Master waved his hand and said, "You can just call me Grand Elder. How about it? Is this deal worth it?" The Palace Master seemed to be quite proud of himself. Longchen nodded. Although the Palace Master of the Imperial Academy was showing off, he was indeed knowledgeable about the past and present. However, Longchen did not come today just for this matter. "I want to know how we can save the Ladywalk clan, and also how we can find a foothold in the God Realm and find a place to settle down." The Imperial College had countless resources, and it was also the fastest way to integrate into the ancient sacred divine world. If the palace was willing to help them, they would not be stuck in the ancient sacred divine world. Taishang took a deep look at Longchen and said, "When my Imperial College came to the ancient sacred divine world, the first thing I discovered was that the strength of the people here can be said to be terrifying. The name of the divine world is indeed true. In the 10 Directions celestial domain, an Emperor Realm cultivator can do whatever he wants. However, in the ancient sacred divine world, every Emperor Realm cultivator has 100,000 Emperor Realm cultivators under him." After he finished speaking, his eyes seemed to sparkle as he stared at Longchen and said in a deep voice, "Under such circumstances, what chance do you think you have to save a family with a venerable emperor?" Longchen was speechless for a moment. An emperor had 10,000 emperors under him, and an emperor had 100,000 great emperors under him. Only the heavens knew how terrifyingly powerful the Goddess Wa clan was. In comparison, Longchen, a great emperor, was just a drop in the ocean. The Northern Foot territory belongs to the Ethereal King. A deity king has 1,000 venerable emperors under him. How terrifying is that? Taishang could not help but tremble slightly. The meaning of his words was very clear. He was trying to persuade Longchen that not a single venerable emperor among the 1,000 venerable emperors would pay any attention to him. Moreover, he could not control the life and death of the Goddess Wa clan. The two of them were silent for a moment. After a long while, Taishang shook his head and opened his mouth to speak. However, Longchen suddenly spoke and interrupted him. "In the future, when I walk out of the barren land in the 10 Directions celestial domain's ancient desolate lands, who would know that I would reach the great Emperor Realm today? How many people can step into this magnificent divine world where experts are as common as clouds? In the future, why can't I, Longchen, gain a foothold in the ancient sacred divine world? Maybe I can't save the Goddess Wa clan, but I must repay this kindness." Longchen's words made Taishang swallow the words that he was about to say. He looked at Longchen in a daze, then suddenly laughed and said, "Today, I want to make friends with you. Take these 2 things and leave. If I have any news that can save the Goddess Wa clan, I will inform you immediately." After that, 2 golden spines appeared in his hand and he handed them to Longchen. Longchen took the spines and felt that they were extremely heavy, and there was a force that was completely different from his. Taishang said, "These are the spines of 2 divine clan members. They were brought back by the people of the academy when they were on the verge of death. The 2 of you put these on your spines. In the eyes of others, you are completely divine clan members." Longchen nodded and put away the spines. He slowly stood up and bowed deeply to the stage. Taishang nodded slightly. Since Longchen had accepted the spines, it meant that they had become friends. Longchen turned around and left. Taishang looked at his back and thought of what Longchen had just said. He couldn't help but laugh. After a while, he clapped his hands casually, and one by one, the elders of the academy appeared in the hall. He said faintly, "You must have eavesdropped on us from outside. If you know what to do, then do it. The elders blushed and explained awkwardly, "It's an occupational disease. We can't keep secrets in front of others." "But Taishang, please enlighten us. Continue to learn about the ancient saint divine world. The Academy of Taishang wants to create countless lists in the ancient saint divine world. Find a place for Longchen to establish a foothold for the people of the 10 Directions celestial domain. He has saved many people with great means, but these people can't live forever. Find a way to save the goddess Hua clan. Since he treats me as a friend, I will do my best." With one order after another, the elders of the Academy rubbed their palms together in anticipation. It was as if the ancient saint divine world was an unexplored and mysterious place to them. They wanted to build a brand new system here. Perhaps in the near future, the Academy of Taishang would have the same status as the 10 Directions celestial domain in the ancient saint divine world. All kinds of weapon lists, countless sovereigns, and emperors were ranked. Everyone's blood boiled at the thought of this. They didn't seem to remember the last 2 orders Taishang gave about Longchen. Seeing Taishang's gloomy face, the elders in charge whispered, "He's a great emperor in the 10 Directions celestial domain. He's the best subject for us to study. But now that he's in the divine world, how can he stop the goddess Hua clan from being in danger? We've received news a few days ago that the human Tao sovereign and another sovereign are preparing for war. And a foothold. The divine world is vast and boundless. He can find a foothold anywhere, but he can't find a foothold anywhere." The elders' voices grew lower and lower as they saw Taishang's gloomy face. Chapter 740. Longchen and Jian Shan left the Imperial Academy. Before they could find a place to settle down, they could only wander around the mountains. The ancient sacred divine world was indeed a little strange. Under an emperor, there were 10,000 emperors, and each emperor was accompanied by 100,000 emperors. There were 1,000 emperors in the entire North Foot territory. It was difficult to estimate the number of people. However, it was difficult to see a single person in the mountains. After the giant god that day, Longchen and Jian Shan had not seen anyone from the god clan. Even so, the 2 of them did not dare to relax in the slightest. They opened up the center of a huge mountain range. They cultivated day and night, not daring to slack off at all. Puchi. Longchen, who had been standing dozens of meters away from Jian Shan, suddenly woke up from his meditation. He spat out a mouthful of blood essence and his face was extremely ugly. "Master, what's wrong with you? This blood is soul blood. There's something wrong with your soul." Jian Shan frowned. Both of them were great emperors, and the power of their souls was their foundation. Longchen spitting out soul blood was definitely not a small matter. Just as Longchen was about to speak, the bloody person in his mind, whom he had ignored all this time, snorted coldly and said, "There are so many living beings in the Dragon Palace in your spiritual soul. They are constantly corroding your spiritual soul. If it weren't for the suppression of the Chaos Golden Classic, your soul would have been destroyed long ago." Longchen was silent. He was very afraid of this so-called ancient sacred emperor's remnant soul, but what he said was the truth. If this continued, not only would he not be able to protect everyone in the Dragon Palace, but his soul would also be destroyed. "Then what can you do? If you want me to trust you, you should do something," Longchen asked in his mind. The bloody man was silent for a long time, but shook his head and said, "Send them to the God Realm's remnant land. This is the only way." "The remnant land?" Longchen frowned slightly and motioned for him to continue. Seeing that Longchen was still meditating, Jian Shan did not say anything else. In the ancient saint divine world, there are rules of the divine world. Even though you are only in the martial emperor realm now, if you want to reach the god emperor realm, you have to be crowned by a god emperor first. Every imperial emperor can have 100,000 great emperors as his followers. He can crown anyone. If you haven't been crowned, you won't be able to enter the source of the sacred world. No matter how heaven-defying your talent is, you can only stay where you are in the ancient sacred divine world. Those who do not follow the monarch are refugees. They are not allowed to enter the city, nor are they qualified to be crowned. Longchen stood rooted to the ground, unable to speak for a long time. After a while, he asked in a deep voice, "Are you saying that in the ancient Saint Divine world, if I want to raise my cultivation, I have to be recognized and crowned by someone who is qualified? Otherwise, you won't be able to move an inch?" Longchen was suddenly enlightened. He finally understood why in the ancient sacred divine world, one sovereign could lead 10,000 sovereign emperors, and each sovereign emperor could lead 100,000 great sovereigns. In the entire ancient sacred divine world, under the sovereign lord, it was like an ancient tree with branches and leaves. One gave birth to two, two gave birth to three, from the sovereign lord to the end of the great sovereigns. One layer of management, one layer of control, one layer of control. The word crown was a restriction on everyone's cultivation, forcing them to submit to others. "Where is the abandoned land?" Longchen asked in a deep voice. The sovereign lord's remnant soul shook his head and did not answer him, because he did not know where the abandoned land was. In his previous life, he had built the ancient sacred divine world with the power of a world lord, so that the rules would be clear and orderly, so that there would be no struggle under absolute power. As the sovereign lord, he could control the people under him through layers of control. This was also the reason why the ancient sacred divine world was feared by the other divine worlds. Even if you were peerless in your generation, under the rules of the ancient sacred divine world, you would only be a pile of bones if no one crowned you. As for the abandoned land, he had always treated it as a sacrifice for the stability of the divine world. He had never been willing to see this place, let alone know where the abandoned land was. Longchen slowly stood up. He suddenly asked the sovereign lord's remnant soul, "Since you are the sovereign lord's consciousness and have his memories, can you crown me?" The sovereign lord's remnant soul was stunned. He said, "If you reach the peak of the emperor realm, I can try to crown you. I have never crowned anyone as an emperor lord, those who have been crowned by me are all god emperors. Of course, if the coronation is successful, I only need to wave my arm and countless god emperors will come. But by then, the people from the Dragon Palace would have already corroded your soul." Longchen nodded. He had already let down his guard against the sovereign lord. This was because he heard a familiar taste in his words. It was a kind of deep regret and sorrow. Just like in his previous life, he had been trapped in the destruction of his family and Helen's death and depression. He knew that at this moment, only the abandoned land, as mentioned by the sovereign lord's remnant soul, was enough for them to stay for a while. Longchen walked out of the mountain range. The faint light in his hand flickered in the air, and then disappeared into the void. In the next moment, Shu San appeared a few meters in front of him. Before Longchen could speak, Shu San spoke first. "We have found a place for you to stay for a short time. There will be a place for the remnants of the ancient era after 1,000,000 miles into the mountains. The abandoned land is also the place where the great emperors choose their god emperors. Of course, most of them are below the god emperor realm. So the cultivation of the ancient sacred divine world is not." Shu San's eyes lit up. His gaze was extremely similar to that of the Supreme Elder and many other elders. Longchen quickly waved his hand to stop him. He interrupted, "Okay, I already know about the cultivation of this place, there is no need to elaborate." Shu San's face turned red as if he had swallowed a fly. He seemed to be very unhappy that Longchen interrupted him. He snorted coldly, "Then the two of you can set off now. I have already seen for you, there are still 3 strongholds in the abandoned land that are in a state of competition. You can try. If you can seize one of them, you can stay for a while. You and Jianshur-san have the backbone of the divine race. You can be completely regarded as a divine race, but you have to call the people of the 10 directions heaven domain slaves." When Shu San finished speaking, he had already disappeared. Longchen smiled bitterly. He originally wanted to let Shu San take the 2 of them. Now it seemed that interrupting the words of the imperial palace's people to show off would arouse jealousy and hatred. Longchen and Jianshur-san flew out, heading straight into the depths of the mountains. 1,000,000 miles of land was not too far for them to fly in the air. But their speed was not fast. Every once in a while, they had to slow down in front of a giant god. These giant gods were almost the same as the ones they saw that day. They all had unfathomable divine power. It was more like they were patrolling the countless mountains. This was also the reason why Longchen and Jianshi San did not dare to release the people of the 10 Directions Heaven domain in the mountains. Chapter 741. The Land of the Remnant. When Longchen stood in the endless swamp and desert, he completely understood the chill of these 4 words. The originally lush mountains, after going 1,000,000 miles deep, were like the difference between heaven and earth. Swamp, desert. These 2 places should not exist at the same time, but at this moment, they strangely appeared in front of the 2. There was a city wall made of various boulders, which was riddled with holes like a hornet's nest. Such a city wall stretched endlessly, as if the whole mountain range was cut from the horizon. It was precisely because of this continuous stretch that when Longchen and Jianshi San looked over, the left side of the city wall was already a swamp, and then it changed into an endless desert. The sky above the desert and the swamp seemed to be very gloomy. Under the gloomy sky and the extremely barren land, there were many villages. These villages were all built of earth and wood. Perhaps it was because the earth and wood were taken away that this place became like this. Jianshi San and Longchen looked at each other, and then walked to an entrance of the city wall. No matter how barren this place was, if they could settle down, it was their only place to go. There was no one guarding the entrance of the city gate. In fact, even the city gate had been broken by more than half. They just entered the city gate and walked for more than 100 meters. Longchen and Jianshi San saw Shu San coming towards them, who seemed to have been waiting for them for a long time. Shu San put away the paper and pen, and led the 2 to the second village on the left side of the gate, saying, "You've brought almost all the people in the 10 Directions Heavenly Domain. If you want to have a foothold in the Land of the Remnant, you'd better take over a village. Of course, it would be best if they are willing to restore their freedom, but in the Land of the Remnant, people below the Emperor realm are basically slaves." The 3 people walked one after the other. Shu San seemed to be quite familiar with this place, which made Longchen feel a little grateful. Letting them, a group of people from the Imperial Academy, do these things, was probably equivalent to the lowest level of work for them. After walking for a long time, the whole village seemed to be empty. It wasn't until Shu San brought them to a counter that they saw an old man. This old man's face was thin and withered, his teeth were dark yellow and 2 of them were missing. He didn't even look at the 3 of them and said, "Just now, another village has been allocated. There are 2 more. The qualifications to participate are 100,000 slaves at the Emperor realm." Longchen frowned slightly, but still walked forward under Shu San's signal. The old man waved his hand and a 3-colored demonic beast skull appeared in front of him. He motioned for Longchen to pour his soul into the skull. The old man placed his right hand on the 3-colored beast, and a moment later, his expression became strange. "You're just an early-stage soul emperor, but you have hundreds of thousands of slaves? Are you from an abandoned clan?" The old man stared at Longchen curiously. He didn't seem to want to hear Longchen's answer. He threw a jade pendant to Longchen and shook his head. "All right, you can now participate in the village competition. But let me give you a word of advice. With your cultivation level, I'm afraid you'll lose your life if you're not careful. Also, let those people in your hands go and let them fend for themselves." Longchen didn't pay attention to his words. He turned and walked away with the jade pendant. There were only a few simple arrays and a few divine will imprints in the jade pendant. Before Longchen could tell them the information in the jade pendant, Shu San had already begun to explain to the 2 of them. It turned out that the competition for the village was very strange. It wasn't a competition of strength, but a hunt for giant gods. It was the giant god that Longchen saw when they first met Shu San. These giant gods were also called realm patrollers. They came and went from the entire ancient sacred heavenly world. They were born under the rules, and each of them was at the peak of the Emperor realm. However, their intelligence was extremely low, and they only knew how to act according to established rules. One of these rules was to expel the survivors who were no longer part of the organization, so they could only stay in the mountains forever. Therefore, these survivors hated the giant gods very much. Of course, the hunt for the giant gods was also for the emperor origin energy within them. Jianshur-san couldn't help but ask, who are the owners of these villages? Even if we can obtain the right to use the villages by killing the giant gods, do they really not care about our cultivation level? The people here don't care about cultivation level, because they will never be able to reach the emperor realm. Even if they obtain the emperor origin energy from the giant gods, they will just sell it, Shu-san replied. Shu-san saw that Jianshur-san didn't seem to know anything about the coronation, so he immediately explained it again. These words caused Jianshur-san's face to darken. The feeling of his fate being in the hands of others made him very uncomfortable. They were all emperors now, but none of them had been crowned. In other words, the peak of their cultivation level was the peak of the emperor realm. After that, they would be restricted by the rules and could not advance even an inch. Seeing Jianshur-san's appearance, Shu-san shook his head and said, "You don't need to worry about these things now. I have also collected some information about this giant god of slaughter. It should be able to help you two get through it. However, I have one thing to remind you. There are nearly 10 emperors secretly controlling this abandoned land, and one of them is one of the 10,000 emperors under the command of the human Tao sovereign. And the two villages you are fighting over this time are controlled by several big shots of the abandoned land on the surface. They were all released from his hands." Long Chen and Jianshur-san heard this and their faces became somewhat hazy. The human Tao sovereign was the controller of the corpse world in the 10 directions celestial domain, but now they had a trace of intersection. But in any case, it was imperative to seize a foothold now. And this abandoned land was already the best choice at the moment. The three of them no longer spoke. Long Chen and Jianshur-san also memorized the information collected by Shu-san one by one. After traveling for a while, Shu-san had already disappeared into the sky again. Long Chen and Jianshur-san came to the mountain where many of the abandoned people were. There were no less than 10 million of them densely packed together. But as they gradually approached, they would find that these were just shadows that were almost substantial. Only in front of these shadows, in the formation patterns that spanned across the mountain range, there was a real figure. They were the contestants. The contestants in the shadows and in the formation uniformly looked at Long Chen and Jianshur-san. Immediately, everyone's face revealed a look of surprise. Although the minimum requirement for the right to use the villages was the Emperor Realm, which one of the contestants was not at the peak of the Emperor Realm. Now there were 2 early-stage emperors. What? Now even these people dare to participate in the competition? Chapter 742. The arrival of the 2 early-stage martial emperors immediately attracted countless gazes. Long Chen and Jianshur-san ignored everyone's words. The jade tablets in their hands flashed as they walked into the formation that spanned across several mountain ranges. Long Chen and Jianshur-san walked into the formation. The formation that spanned across several mountain ranges began to spin on its own. Then, the positions of the 13 contestants began to change. The original area of the formation was now evenly divided into a total of 14 regions. Among the countless figures in all directions, 2 eagle-headed men with lightning tattoos appeared in the center. These 2 men were nearly 4 meters tall. Their muscles intersected like ravines, and they were filled with explosive power. Long Chen and Jianshur-san glanced at each other. They already knew. These 2 men were the 2 big shots that Shu-san had mentioned. They were under the control of the martial emperor. These 2 strongholds were what they had brought out for everyone to fight over. Seeing the 2 men appear, countless people in the illusory figures bowed their heads in greeting. The 2 eagle-headed men spoke in human language. Time's up. Activate the formation and summon the realm patrollers. The rules are the same as before. The first 2 people to obtain the most emperor origin energy will each obtain a stronghold to raise slaves. Long Chen and Jianshur-san looked at these 2 people, but they could not help being shocked. Although these 2 men had not reached the martial emperor level of cultivation, their words were accompanied by thunder and exuded a strong sense of destruction. Although they were both peak martial emperors, their strength was likely far greater than those of the same level. On the other side, as the eagle-headed men with lightning tattoos finished speaking, everyone began to move. Apart from Long Chen, more than 10 people appeared around each of the other 13 contestants. These people spread out, causing the 13 contestants to form specific battle formations. Only Long Chen and Jianzhi San did not move. The cold-faced middle-aged man closest to them couldn't help but mock. "What, you two aren't planning on suppressing the realm patrollers with just your 2 hands, are you? You don't even know the Fuyuan battle formation?" As expected of someone who has just arrived. Even so, he still wants to seize a stronghold. How laughable. Hurry up and activate the formation. Being able to participate in the competition means that he has a lot of slaves in his hands. When the time comes, we can also pick some from among them. These people all had subordinates who were below the Emperor realm. These people were all enslaved in the abandoned land. There were countless strongholds in the land of the remnant, but these strongholds were controlled by the most powerful people. These people would then distribute the excess goods in the same way as they were doing now. Slaves could be kept in captivity, and any rules were set by themselves. Buzz buzz buzz. A series of roars began to resound, and the inscriptions beneath Long Chen and the others' feet began to flicker. The multicolored light that filled the sky began to flash rapidly in a special rhythm. As the brilliance flashed, everyone felt the earth begin to shake in a short time. Roar! Accompanied by angry roars, giant gods descended from the sky like meteors from the 9 heavens. Long Chen and Jianzhi San sighed. The strength of each of these giant gods was almost the same, and even their appearances were exactly the same. 14 brilliances, 14 contestants, each standing in front of a giant god. The moment these giant gods appeared, divine light began to condense on the 3-bladed pitchforks in their hands, and they attacked the contestants standing on the inscriptions. Among the various spectators, countless people began to cheer, as if everyone was extremely angry with the realm patroller. A sigh sounded in Long Chen's mind, and the Emperor Lord's remnant soul murmured, "I established these rules and regulations to protect the peace of the God realm. There should not be so many remnant citizens." Long Chen did not pay attention to the Emperor Lord's remnant soul. He and Jianzhi San quickly swept through the air, and began to dodge the attacks of the giant god with a very strange footwork. This was the method that Shu San had taught them. Otherwise, with their cultivation in the early stage of the Emperor realm, they would not have been able to defeat the giant god without knowing anything about it. Long Chen and Jianzhi San, one in front and one behind, their footsteps turned into lines of inscriptions as they landed. The other 13 teams chose to directly attack with their battle formations. However, these people seemed to know the realm patroller very well, and the rhythm of their attacks was very accurate. Moreover, each of them had a cultivation in the great circle of the Emperor realm, so they were naturally at ease. Rumble. In less than a quarter of an hour, the giant gods had already fallen under the battle formations. Quickly take out the Emperor core force. The next 3 rounds of realm patrollers are the key. The various teams began to take out the so-called Emperor core force. This Emperor core force was contained in the giant god's glabella, and it was a mass of dark light that was close to chaotic. As the dark light was taken out, the giant body of the realm patroller turned into dust at a speed visible to the naked eye. The people of the 13 divisions took out their Emperor core force one after another. Only Long Chen and Jianzhi San were still dodging, and the streams of light in the air were densely intertwined. What are these two doing? They still haven't killed the first realm patroller that appeared in the first round? The 2 of them don't even use the Fuyuan battle formation. How can they compare to the other 13 teams? It's already not bad if they can kill 2 rounds of realm patrollers in the same amount of time. These large clans that have been reduced to remnant people must suffer a little before they learn the rules of the remnant people land. Many people shook their heads and sneered at Long Chen and Jianzhi San. Then, they all looked away and looked at the other 13 teams. After the first round ended, these people quickly activated the second round of battle formations. The second round of battle formations was the same as the first round, but 3 realm patrollers appeared. For a time, the giant gods on the mountain continued to attack, and a terrible pressure swept through the air, and countless divine lights rose and fell one after another. The various teams had already begun to fight their respective 3 realm patrollers. Only Longchen and Jianshursan were still moving, and their speed was getting faster and faster. In the first round, it took them only a quarter of an hour to defeat a realm patroller. In the second round, it took them at least 3 hours. When the third round began, Longchen and Jianshursan still had not finished off the first realm patroller. This caused countless people to roar with laughter, and even the 2 eagle-headed realm patrollers could not help but snort coldly. Seeing that the third round was over, the various teams were about to face the fourth round. Every team had begun to die, and the Fuyuan battle formation was even beginning to disintegrate. In the distance, 2 streaks of light rushed towards Longchen and Jianshursan, stopping outside the spirit array, their eyes full of disdain. The middle-aged man shouted, "You 2 quickly withdraw from the spirit array. Don't play to the gallery and waste the power of this spirit array." Chapter 743. Longchen and Jianshursan had yet to make a move. They had been dodging and evading the attacks with strange footwork. Their actions had obviously aroused the displeasure of the organizers. The middle-aged man saw that Longchen and Jianshursan had ignored him and his face turned cold. "Ignorant brats, get out of the array!" Rays of cold divine light condensed in his right hand and transformed into a giant hand that grabbed at the 2. In his opinion, Longchen and Jianshursan were only in the early stage of the martial emperor realm. Their actions had already embarrassed him. Just as his attack was about to land, countless threads suddenly appeared between Longchen and Jianshursan. These threads intertwined at strange angles. Between the 2 of them was the huge body of the realm patroller. Whoosh! With a loud sound, the realm patroller's body shattered in front of everyone's eyes. Then, the giant hand was sliced into countless pieces as it fell. Buzz buzz buzz. A series of buzzing sounds accompanied by flashing green lights reverberated between Longchen and Jianshursan. Everyone subconsciously turned their heads and shifted their gazes away from the other teams to look at Longchen in unison. What's wrong with these 2? Are those lights the paths they've been walking for the past few hours? Is that a movement technique or a martial art technique? How could they defeat a peak martial emperor realm patroller in an instant? So what if they've defeated him? They've only defeated one person after so long. The others are about to enter the fourth round. The weakest team has already obtained 7 pieces of Emperor Core energy. Although the crowd was shocked by the sudden burst of power of Longchen and Jianshursan, they did not take it to heart. Longchen and Jianshursan did not take everyone's gazes and words to heart. They knew clearly that Shu San, a member of the Imperial Academy of Sciences, had said that this set of footwork could help them take down a mountain stronghold. There was no way he was wrong. Longchen shouted coldly, "Continue. Don't let them stop." Swoosh! Swoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, Longchen released a stream of demonic aura from his body into the array, which immediately lit up the array. Immediately after, meteors streaked across the sky and fell from the sky. They were all godlike realm patrollers. Whoosh! One by one, the border patrollers charged towards Longchen and Jianshursan. Their attacks were relentless, as if they wanted to raze the entire mountain to the ground. However, Longchen's footsteps were still dozens of meters away from them. This was followed by a series of bone-chilling cutting sounds. The realm patrollers shattered in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only the Emperor Origin energy. Again. Another wave of demonic aura descended, and another realm patroller descended from the sky. In less than 100 breaths of time, everyone was stunned. Many people from the other groups had already died. So, they stopped activating the formation and stared blankly at Longchen. Among the phantoms, countless survivors widened their eyes when they saw this scene. This was simply a meat grinder. Once the realm patrollers entered between the two of them, they were instantly shredded to pieces. Two eagle-headed gods slowly stood up among the phantoms, their sharp eyes fixed on Long Chen and Jianshi San. What kind of footwork is this? Could it be some kind of battle formation? This formation's lethality against the realm patrollers is far greater than the Fuyuan formation. What kind of god clan are these two from? They are so proficient in this kind of technique. But how did they end up like this? Tisk tsk, in just 100 breaths of time, they have obtained nearly 20 strands of Emperor origin energy. One of the two strongholds now belongs to the two of them. There was a lot of discussion. Everyone looked at Long Chen and Jianshi San in a new light because of this. However, there was also a group of people whose faces were as gloomy as water, extremely ugly. This person had 10 strands of Emperor origin energy in his hands. Compared to the other contestant, he only had 2 strands less. Originally, he could have won second place and obtained a stronghold to be his local tyrant and raise more slaves. However, Long Chen's sudden reversal put him in first place. He was naturally in third place. With 2 strongholds, the third place was equivalent to nothing. You two are courting death. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. His face suddenly became ferocious. A long saber in his right hand pierced through the air. As the saber light fell, it drew upon the power of the god realm, creating a boundless pressure. Long Chen and Jianshi San's faces changed instantly. They felt as if they had fallen into the depths of the ocean and their bodies were about to be crushed. Was this the strength of a peak emperor? Was this the way of attack in the ancient sacred god realm? For a moment, Long Chen and Jianshi San clenched their fists, their eyes burning with passion. Their figures flashed rapidly, wanting to rely on the footwork left behind by Shu San to dodge this attack. However, before they could move, a flash of lightning came from within the city of the remnant land. The two places were far apart, but this attack seemed to have appeared in front of Long Chen and the others in the blink of an eye. The lightning struck, and the man's saber light was instantly shattered and dissipated into nothingness. The lightning stopped at the glabella of the middle-aged man holding the long saber. It remained motionless, exuding a terrible sense of destruction. Long Chen and Jianshi San turned around subconsciously and saw that an eagle-headed god had appeared 100 feet away from them. The eagle-headed god did not transform into a human, but he spoke in human language with a sharp voice. This is the land of the remnant land. It's not your turn to fight for the stronghold. With that, the lightning that stopped at the glabella of the middle-aged man disappeared without a trace. The middle-aged man hurriedly knelt down and said in fear, I was too impulsive. Please don't blame me, Master Lei. Get lost. If there is a next time, there will be no place for you in the land of the remnant land. The spectators and the contestants all fell silent. The eagle-headed god slowly turned his head and his gaze fell on Long Chen and Jianshi San. He stared at Long Chen and said, This stronghold is yours this year, but you have to hand over at least 1,000 units of Emperor primary force every month. With that, without waiting for Long Chen and Jianshi San to agree, he threw a thunder-patterned jade pendant on the ground in front of Long Chen. The jade pendant was on the ground. It was not handed over to Long Chen, nor was it handed over to Jianshi San. The people around shook their heads and laughed when they saw this scene. There was a hint of sarcasm in their eyes. We have to hand over 100 units of Emperor primary force every month. Without the help of the formation here, it will take most of our time. How can you compare yourself to others? After all, he just obtained 20 units of Emperor primary force in a short time. That's because the formation here can attract the border patrollers. If he went out to hunt by himself, it would not be so simple. Chapter 744. The battle between the two strongholds had come to an end. Such a battle was held every year, but this year it was a little different and caused a lot of discussion. The crowd had already dispersed, and the array that hunted the patrollers had also completely disappeared. The mountain range was empty. Only Long Chen and Jianshi San stood in place and did not move for a long time. A few meters in front of them, a thunder jade token fell into the soil. Jianshi took a deep breath and reached out to pick it up. He had just moved. Longchen bent down and took the jade token out of the soil. He put away the jade token and said to Jianshi, "This is the first foothold in the God realm." Jianshi looked at Longchen's back and did not speak for a long time. After a while, he quickly chased after him. The eagle-headed divine clan seemed to have saved them, but in fact, they were just tools to obtain the Emperor origin energy. They were full of disdain for them. Longchen bent down to tell Jianshi, Today. They were no longer the dominating experts in the corpse world who held the world in their hands. Only those who could bend could stand tall. The two left and returned to the stronghold. The entire land of the remnant was divided into countless strongholds, which were like rows of rows that separated the entire depths of the mountain. Every stronghold had one. However, such a large number of strongholds only belonged to 4 remnant forces. One of them was the eagle-headed divine clan. In the entire land of the remnant, any stronghold with an eagle carving on it belonged to the eagle-headed divine clan. Longchen and Jianshi took the Thunder Jade token to a stronghold in the northwest. As soon as they entered the stronghold, Longchen activated all the arrays around with the Jade token. Immediately, the light of his spirit swept out. Wherever he passed, human figures would appear out of thin air. Jianshi also took out a scabbard-like magic weapon, and with a wave of his hand, 5 figures appeared. The figures intertwined. In the blink of an eye, the entire stronghold was full of people. When these people saw Longchen and Jianshi, their faces were filled with confusion. These days, although they were in Longchen's divine soul dragon palace, they were aware of what was happening outside. This is the God realm? The 10 directions heavenly domain has been destroyed. Do we have to live in such a small place? I want to leave this place. There is still a vast world outside this stockade. The great Tao leads to the heavens. There will always be a place for us. The walled city was vast, and there were many spatial arrays inside. But even so, when Longchen summoned these countless people, it caused this place to be practically connected to each other. The noise swept out like a wave. Longchen took a deep breath. His entire body soared into the air, and his aura suddenly dispersed. Everyone in the stronghold suddenly quieted down. Hundreds of thousands of people looked at Longchen in unison. These people were almost the top cultivators in the 10th heaven, and some of them had followed Longchen from beginning to end. Longchen looked at these people, took a deep breath, and said in a deep voice, "The entire 10 directions heavenly domain has been destroyed. All the people who can be saved in the 10th heaven are all here. This is the ancient sacred divine world. Although it is magnificent, it is also full of danger. If you have not reached the great Emperor realm, this place is your only place to stay. I will always put this jade token on the door. You can leave freely. However, for a short time, this stronghold is the safest place." After Longchen finished speaking, he turned around and led Jianshi into the depths of the stronghold. Qingxian and the others followed closely behind. Even though this place was overcrowded, the people around still left 2 medium-sized courtyards for Longchen and Jianshi. Long Tianqing and several people from the Long family also arrived one after another. Looking at the hundreds of thousands of people outside the courtyard, Long Tianqing frowned and asked Longchen, "Chener, how are you going to deal with these people?" Longchen smiled bitterly and shook his head. He knows that Long Tianqing and the others still regard him as their backbone. But they don't know that the ancient sacred divine world is so vast that an Emperor Realm Master has no right to speak at all. The people brought by the 10 directions heavenly domain were like a mountain pressing on his shoulders at all times. Puchi. The people from the Long family and the many sovereigns from the 10th heaven wanted to say something, but they saw Longchen spit out a mouthful of blood in the courtyard. Before they could say anything, Longchen waved his hand and motioned them to retreat for the time being. Only Long Tianqing, his wife, and Qingxian looked at Longchen with worry. Longchen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, "Mother, Don't worry, it's just a sudden contraction of my divine soul. It's much better now. Long Tianqing, his wife, and Qing Xian looked at Long Chen with heartache. They were in the Dragon Palace, so they naturally knew that the Dragon Palace contained the pressure of hundreds of thousands of people. Although the Dragon Palace was strange and extraordinary, it caused unimaginable damage to Long Chen's divine soul. It was like putting a stone several times his size into a balloon. Now that the stone was suddenly taken out, his divine soul inevitably contracted and shook. Long Chen didn't talk about all the people from the 10 directions heavenly domain. In the current situation, he could only take one step at a time. These people must absorb everything in the ancient sacred divine world as fast as possible. A year in the remnant land gave them a chance to catch their breath. While talking, Long Chen closed his eyes and began to repair his divine soul. Everyone also sat in a corner. After all, this courtyard was more spacious than the outside world. As Long Chen repaired his divine soul, his mind sank into the center of the Dragon Palace. The bloody man was still in the same place. He looked at Long Chen and said, "Have you thought it through? I need your help, and you need me too." Long Chen stared at the Emperor's remnant soul and said, "They only have the memory of the Dragon Palace in their minds, but they didn't mention you at all. It seems that you're not as weak as you look. The Dragon Palace was created by the Primal Chaos Golden Code, and it was formed by my bloodline origin. It naturally nourishes me." The Emperor's remnant soul didn't hide anything. Long Chen wasn't worried about the Dragon Palace being leaked out. Even if such a palace was leaked out, it would only be treated as an ordinary instrument in the endless divine world. It was just like how he was alone, but the person who tested him knew that he had hundreds of thousands of slaves. Many people here had instruments that could contain slaves on such a large scale. Long Chen stared at the Emperor's remnant soul and said in a deep voice, "I want you to help me step into the peak of the martial Emperor realm as soon as possible, and then be crowned as the Emperor. 3 years is enough, but whether or not you can be crowned depends on your luck. I've said before that I've never been crowned as an ultimate god." Long Chen nodded, indicating that he agreed. He was still wary of the remnant soul. No matter what, the remnant soul was now a shortcut for him to solve his current predicament. Chapter 745. The Emperor Lord and Long Chen came to a temporary agreement. The Emperor Lord was very knowledgeable about the Emperor Primary Force and the Primal Chaos Golden Codex, and told Long Chen how to use the Emperor Primary Force to repair his soul. In the blink of an eye, it was already the next day. Early in the morning, Long Chen began to try to use the Emperor Primary Force to repair his soul. At this time, a woman walked in without knocking on the door. Long Tianqing and the others, as well as Qing Xian, saw the woman come in, looked at each other, and walked out of the room. Long Chen's originally tense heartstrings suddenly relaxed when he saw the woman. Yunmei saw that everyone had left, and her gloomy face suddenly snorted coldly, "You hid here well. It's been a whole day, and you didn't come out to look for me. Weren't you leading the Yun family to a meeting today to discuss how to establish a foothold in the remnant land?" "Miss Yun also came to see me just now because she had time," Long Chen smiled. Yunmei's face was ashen when she came in, but it did not escape Long Chen's eyes. In those soul-stirring eyes, there was not only the anger of a little woman, but also the shrewdness and cunning of a businesswoman. Yunmei did not seem to expect that Long Chen had been observing her with his divine sense, and suddenly a smile appeared on her face. As she spoke, she had already walked up to Long Chen, and her hands were very naturally placed on Long Chen's neck, and she said coquettishly, "Give me 2 of that Emperor Primary Force thing, and also your silly disciple, Jian San. Lend me, you borrowed my disciple, but you took the Emperor Primary Force?" Long Chen's words were quite teasing, and he felt quite relaxed in front of Yunmei, as if the pressure of the past few days had been swept away. Yunmei's breath was like orchids, and she did not respond to Long Chen's words at all. Instead, she leaned close to Long Chen's ear and whispered, "This little girl is already yours. Giving me your Emperor Primary Force is the same as giving it to me, so of course I'm taking it, not lending it." Longchen shook his head and laughed, and 2 streams of Emperor Primary Force appeared with a wave of his hand, and he handed them to Yunmei. Yunmei held the Emperor Primary Force in her hand, and jumped Longchen's hand's face, and her face was full of pride. She said, Longchen's hearts, she said, I don't get a share of the profits. Chen, Yunmei's eyes, Yun's family's Yuns. To Chen's to A, and, N's, Tian's, A to be of the heavens, to heavens of heaven and heaven. Moreover, once the people of the 10 heavens domain began to come into contact with the natives of the God world, they would quickly recognize the difference between this world and the 10 heavens domain. Seeing Longchen's serious expression, Yunmei, who was about to turn and leave, suddenly turned around and kissed him deeply on the cheek. Okay, this is your reward. Next time, if you bring more Emperor Primary Force to Big Sister, there will be more rewards. Yunmei's face was rosy, and by the time she finished speaking, she was already outside the courtyard. Longchen was stunned in place. Feeling the unique fragrance around him and touching the moisture on his cheeks, he couldn't help but smile. Compared to Yihalan's coldness and Qing Xian's gentleness, Yunmei was really mischievous, but she made him feel more relaxed than ever. Calming down, Longchen's hand once again produced a stream of Emperor Primary Force. According to the Emperor Master's remnant soul, Emperor Primary Force was the primary force he left behind when the ancient sacred God world was first established. Before the God world was in chaos, no one dared to have any ideas about the world patroller. The Primal Chaos Golden Codex was born before the various God worlds. It is one of the 4 Hongmeng ancient books that evolved from the Primal Chaos. The Emperor Master's remnant soul muttered to himself when he saw that Longchen had begun to operate the Primal Chaos Golden Codex. As soon as the Primal Chaos Golden Codex was activated, the stream of Emperor Primary Force in Longchen's hand turned into water vapor, like a drop of water touching a soldering iron. Then, it enveloped Longchen in layers. Streams of water vapor were sucked into Longchen's body through his 7 orifices. For a moment, divine light rushed out of his body, but it was immediately converted into pure demon aura. The Emperor Master's remnant soul frowned and said in a deep voice, "Do you really want to cultivate the demon Tao? Although you have the Primal Chaos Golden Codex and the Dragon Palace to protect your soul, this path is still extremely dangerous." There were countless god clans in the God world, and all kinds of cultivation methods were endless. The demon Tao was not rare, but there were very few people who could achieve success in it. Longchen nodded and said in a deep voice, "This demon is my oath. As long as I can save Yihalan, I won't hesitate to use any means." A red light flashed in his eyes, but the Emperor Master's remnant soul fell silent. After a long while, he opened his mouth and said, "In the Dragon Palace, the origin source brilliance in the ice coffin condensed by the power of creation is Yihalan. If you want to save her, it's not impossible, but it's too difficult." Too difficult. Longchen might not have taken these words seriously if they had come from someone else. However, the person who spoke now was the remnant soul of the former Emperor Master. The difficulty of this matter was probably beyond Longchen's imagination. Longchen took a deep breath, and the Emperor Primary Force in his body even slowed down a little. He asked in a deep voice, "What's the difficulty?" "Time. Her origin source strength is close to dissipating. Even if you use the power of creation to protect her, she can only last for 100 years. But in 100 years, you can't reach the Realm Lord level." Longchen frowned and said coldly, "In other words, as long as I reach the Realm Lord level, I can save her." The Emperor Master's remnant soul seemed to have sensed Longchen's mood and did not say anything else. He just nodded in agreement. Longchen did not say anything else, but the speed of the Emperor Primary Force's circulation increased rapidly, and a series of roars rang out in his body. For a full 5 days, Longchen did not rest, madly circulating the Primal Chaos Golden Codex to devour the Emperor Primary Force. The demon aura around him seemed to have undergone earth-shattering changes, and he even had some of the pressure of the Realm Patroller. Absorbing more than 10 Emperor Primary Forces in 5 days is not bad, But if you want to reach the Emperor realm as soon as possible, this amount of Emperor primary force is far from enough, the Emperor Master's remnant soul reminded him. If his words were to be heard outside, it would probably cause a huge uproar. Ordinary emperors would need at least 10 days to devour one Emperor primary force, and Long Chen's speed had reached an astonishing level. Why haven't I reached the second level of the Emperor realm? Long Chen frowned. He could clearly feel the vast amount of energy flowing into his body through the primal chaos golden codex. The Emperor Master's remnant soul coldly snorted, if you cultivated an ordinary God clan cultivation method, you would probably be at the 6th level of the Emperor realm by now. This Emperor primary force is no different from the most suitable divine pill for an Emperor realm cultivator. Alright, it's time for you to go out for a walk. You seem to have a little trouble. Chapter 746. Long Chen had been in seclusion for 5 days. Nearly 30% of the people in the village chose to leave and integrate into the remnant land. Most of them were above the Earth's celestial stage. These people were also the core strength of the various clans in the 10 Heavens domain. In fact, Long Chen allowed them to choose whether to stay or leave. There were countless people below the Emperor realm in the remnant land. They could completely integrate into it. However, among the 30% who left, everyone below the Earth's celestial stage was killed. Since yesterday, no one in the entire village dared to leave. Long Chen retracted his divine thought and asked the Emperor Lord's remnant soul, what kind of technique? How long will it take to use it? The Emperor Lord's remnant soul did not answer, but with a thought, a figure appeared in Long Chen's divine soul dragon palace. This figure was exactly the same as Long Chen. Although you're only at the peak of the 1st level of the Emperor realm, your spiritual altar is based on the Dragon Palace. Now that you don't have a weapon, I'll teach you a set of fist techniques from the Battle God clan. With this fist technique, you'll be invincible below the 4th level of the Emperor realm. After that, the figure in the Dragon Palace began to dance rapidly. As the fist technique danced, the figure began to expand at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it turned into a flaming King Kong. Every punch was full of unpredictable power. Just as Long Chen was shocked, a very strange feeling entered his divine soul. For a moment, he felt as if he had practiced this fist technique before. It was somewhat familiar. Don't be confused, the heavenly dragon vein is my inherited bloodline, and this dragon palace was born from the primal chaos golden code. You know too little. As the Emperor Lord's remnant soul's voice fell, countless shadows condensed in the Dragon Palace. Everyone was actually using the Battle God clan's fist technique. In the next moment, Long Chen's heart was already clear. These human-shaped shadows were actually part of his divine soul, but his divine soul was formed in the Dragon Palace. In the blink of an eye, 6 hours had passed. Long Chen suddenly stood up and punched out. He didn't use any divine power in this punch. It was purely a punch of pure power, but it brought forth bursts of divine light and several dozen gusts of fierce wind. Hearing the loud noise coming from the courtyard, Long Tianqing and Qing Xian pushed open the door and came in one after another, followed by Jian Shan. Long Chen saw the two of them and went up to them. He nodded and said, "Do you know who did it? Why did they massacre the people who came out of this stronghold?" Qing Xian replied in a low voice, "The people of the Yun family have asked around. It was done by a middle-aged man named Tao Jiu. It seems that he thinks this stronghold should be his." Jian Shan's face was also full of gloominess. He said to Long Chen, "It's the man who was about to attack us that day." After he was taught a lesson by the Eagle Head God clan, he didn't seem to dare to attack us personally. Instead, he let a few of his subordinates kill the people who came out of this stronghold. Long Chen frowned and said, "What are their cultivations?" Tao Jiu knew our strength. The people he invited were not high martial emperors. They were all at the peak of the 2nd level of the martial emperor realm. Only one of them was at the 3rd level of the martial emperor realm. Jian Shan's words were full of anger. It seemed that he had tried to attack them and must have suffered a little. Tao Jiu knew that the Eagle-Head God clan was interested in Long Chen's method of obtaining a large amount of Emperor origin energy, so he didn't dare to personally suppress Long Chen. Therefore, he secretly killed the slaves who left the stronghold to vent his anger. Long Chen nodded and said to Jian San and the others, "In the next few days, I will leave this stronghold. Before I come back, you should try not to go out. If you need anything, let 13 go out and buy it." Long Chen finished speaking and walked out of the door. His eyes were full of killing intent. Jian San instinctively wanted to stop Long Chen, but when he saw the confidence in Long Chen's eyes, he said, "Master, be careful. These 4 are not weak." Long Chen quickly rushed out of the stronghold. Many of the people from the 10 Directions Heaven domain looked at him with eyes full of respect and indifference. During this period of time, they gradually understood the ancient sacred divine world. They gradually understood that Long Chen's martial emperor cultivation was nothing in this world. Especially when Jian San was forced back to the stronghold by the 2 of them 2 days ago. This made them lose all respect for Long Chen and Jian San. If it weren't for the people outside killing the people who came out of the stronghold, there would be more people who left. But they didn't know that if Long Chen hadn't taken this stronghold for them, the life of a slave outside would be even more difficult. Bang! Long Chen pushed open the door and walked out. The people of the 10 Directions Heaven domain looked on coldly. Only a few of Long Chen's followers looked worried, but they didn't dare to take half a step out of the door. Once in the 10 Directions Heaven domain, they could command the world with their martial emperor cultivation. But now, there were 4 great emperors outside the door. This contrast caused them to feel an unprecedented shock. "Yo, isn't this the stronghold, master? It's been a few days, but this is the first time I've seen you. Don't you know how to greet your seniors?" A burly man holding a long black iron staff said sarcastically. Long Chen had just walked out of the stronghold when he was stopped outside. The other 3 martial emperors looked on from afar, their faces full of mockery. Long Chen stared at the burly man in front of him, then glanced at the 3 nearby. His eyes narrowed, and he said coldly, "Did Tao Jiu invite you here to be his dogs?" The burly man replied, "We just don't like you." What does it have to do with Tao Jiu? But as soon as he finished speaking, he felt that something was wrong. Wasn't this the same as admitting that they were his dogs? The burly man's voice suddenly became cold, and he shouted, "I think you're courting death." Seeing the burly man's anger, one of the 3 nearby, a thin young man said, "Just let him crawl 100 meters away from your crotch. After all, the Eagle-Head celestial race wants him to go out and kill the realm patrollers to obtain Emperor origin energy." The burly man nodded, but the staff in his hand was still swinging out. This attack was so powerful that it caused the surrounding divine light to roll back like a gust of wind. There was no martial skill involved. He wanted to suppress Long Chen with his 2nd-level martial emperor cultivation. Long Chen sneered, and his eyes were full of disdain. Just as the martial emperor's remnant soul said, any divine clan member with a decent bloodline could easily enter the martial emperor realm. Although these people were strong, their combat experience was lacking. Even a lion needs to use all its strength to catch a rabbit. His attack was only meant to humiliate Long Chen. Even an ordinary martial emperor would be able to withstand it. The people around didn't think much of it. After all, Long Chen was only a 1st-level martial emperor. Against a 2nd-level martial emperor and 3 people behind him, the result was obvious. Chapter 747. Under everyone's watchful eyes, everyone looked at Long Chen with disdain. Many people from the 10 Directions Sky Domain turned their heads subconsciously. They had subconsciously thought that the people from the God Realm were superior to them. Long Chen's cultivation level was lower, so it was impossible for him to fight with them. In the ancient sacred divine world, each monarch had at least 100,000 subordinates who were at the God Emperor realm. These numbers had already caused them to lose all their confidence. Everyone sighed when they saw the burly man using his divine power to smash Long Chen with a pressure that filled the sky. However, at this moment, Long Chen suddenly exploded and shouted, "Get lost!" Rumble. Long Chen's speed suddenly changed, and the ground beneath his feet shook. His fists were filled with flames from all directions, and they landed on the burly man in front of him. The fist and the stick collided, and divine light rippled. The burly man's entire right arm was engulfed by the flames, and half of his body turned into powder in the blink of an eye. How could this be? Before he could finish his sentence, the flames in front of him soared into the sky and turned into the shadow of a Vajra, pouncing on him. Bang bang bang. The burly man was smashed into the ground, and his body was completely shattered. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned for a moment. As Long Chen attacked, the remnant soul in his mind spoke again. In the God realm, if you want to kill an Emperor realm expert and destroy his divine soul, you only need to use the surrounding divine power to destroy him. After speaking, Long Chen punched again. This punch pierced through the air, and raging flames swept out from all directions. The flames washed over like waves, and they disappeared in an instant. However, there was nothing in front of Long Chen. Dead? Jingxi died just like that? How is this possible? Isn't he only a first-level Emperor realm expert? What kind of god clan is he? The fist technique he used just now is a god clan's divine fist technique. He killed Jingxi. This time, his feud with Tao Chiu will never end. Everyone was shocked beyond belief. Long Chen was only at the first level of the martial Emperor realm, but he was able to suppress and kill a second-level martial emperor. This was beyond everyone's expectations. In the stockade behind Long Chen, the confusion in the eyes of many people from the 10 directions heaven domain dissipated a little. They stared at Long Chen with a complicated look. Did they really stand a chance against the experts of the ancient Saint Divine world? They didn't have time to say anything. Not far away, the faces of the other 3 people who came with Jingxi were as black as the bottom of a pot. Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. The 3 of them strode toward Long Chen. When the surrounding people saw this, their previous shock disappeared without a trace. Among the 3 of them, the young man in the lead was a third-level martial emperor. He was only 1 step away from the mid-stage martial emperor realm. I've underestimated you. I didn't expect you to be so strong. You're just a fallen member of the divine clan. Even if I can't kill you today, I'll make sure you suffer. The young man's eyes were as sharp as knives as he stared at Long Chen. Let's see if you have the ability. But then, something happened that left everyone speechless. Long Chen bellowed and took the initiative to attack. Bang bang bang. The 2 second-level martial emperors were the first to bear the brunt of Long Chen's attack. As soon as they attacked, they were sent flying. Battle Flame Fist. After Long Chen forced the 2 of them back, he didn't choose to continue the chase. Instead, he raised his fist and attacked the third-level Emperor Realm youth. The young man's expression changed. He seemed to have sensed the power of Long Chen's attack. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them clashed. The surrounding people quickly retreated, creating an area of about 1,000 meters. When the people of the 10 directions heaven domain saw this, they stood up and stared at the 2 of them. If this attack had been used in the 10 directions heaven domain, everything within 1,000,000 miles would have been destroyed. But in the ancient sacred divine world, other than the earth shaking and trees flying, nothing else happened. The ancient sacred divine world was completely different from the 10 directions heaven domain. The 10 directions celestial domain was like a wooden bucket containing all the people in the space. The corpse world itself was unstable. But the ancient sacred divine world was a world created by the ancient sacred divine emperor. This world was full of order. Everything had its own source and was indestructible. Under everyone's watchful eyes, everyone stared at Long Chen. No one had expected a first-level martial emperor to be able to force a third-level martial emperor to retreat. The faces of the people from 10 directions heaven domain had changed color. Their eyes were wide open and they clenched their fists tightly. Long Chen was a first-level martial emperor. He had shown his strength by suppressing the 4 of them. Why couldn't they do the same? Were the people of the 10 directions heaven domain weaker than the people of the ancient sacred divine world? This was a magnificent world that was beyond their imagination, giving them a pressure that made it hard for them to breathe. But didn't it also give them endless possibilities of creation? If they were in the original 10 directions heaven domain, it would be incredible if 2 or 3 of them could reach the Ascension realm. Not to mention becoming a great emperor. It was simply a fool's dream. But in the ancient sacred divine world, there was hope. The origin of space was gathered here. Even a drop of emperor origin energy was a fortune they had never seen before. Kill him! Kill him! In an instant, the people of the 10 directions heaven domain shouted one after another. Every one of them was filled with unwillingness and anger. They came from the 10 directions heaven domain. They were like fish that had come ashore. But now, they were unwilling to wait for death. Rumble. Under the shocked gazes of the people around them, Longchen smashed the man's body into pieces with a single punch. Fists flashed, and waves of origin of flames came from all directions. Longchen listened to the shouts of the people of the 10 directions heaven domain behind him and felt his blood boil. He had been reborn twice. In the first life, he relied on the body of a great emperor. Although the path of cultivation was bumpy, it was smooth and unimpeded. In the second life, he relied on the strength of his previous life to rise up like a monster. Now, he had come to an era where there were countless great emperors, emperors, god kings, gods, and countless other experts. In this life, Longchen also wanted to defy the heavens and achieve a great Tao. Under the waves of origin energy, the soul of the young man trembled. Longchen shouted, "How many more of the people who killed my stronghold are there?" Nearly 30% of the people of the 10 directions heaven domain who came out were killed. This grudge could not be forgotten. Chapter 748. Longchen flew away, and Jian Shan followed closely behind. But a divine thought was transmitted into his mind. He stopped, turned around, and shouted to everyone in the stockade, "From today on, no one is allowed to leave the stockade until my master returns." Qing Xian, Long Tianxing, and the others were all worried. Even if they didn't leave the stockade, they knew what Longchen was going to do. Many people in the remnant land were stunned when they saw the young man vanish into thin air. Longchen's combat power today really made them drop their jaws, but none of them thought that Longchen would dare to find trouble with the Ninetail Casino at this moment. Is this man crazy? Isn't it enough to defeat these people? He even dares to go to the Ninetail Casino. The Ninetail Casino specializes in accepting some things that are inconvenient for the stockade. They may not have many people with high cultivation, but they have a lot of people. It is said that Tao Chio has also participated in the dividends of the Ninetail Casino, and some of his assets are in it. It seems that this guy is going to break the sky this time. While the crowd was discussing, they also quickly followed Longchen and swept away into the distance. As Longchen passed through, his divine thought constantly swept the streets of the remnant land. Although he was extremely unfamiliar with this place, it was too easy to find a casino in this place. After half an hour of tossing and turning, Longchen had already appeared in front of a towering tower built of 9 giant trees. Although the giant trees were decaying, they were not bad compared to the buildings in other places in the remnant land. Especially between its doors, there was almost an endless stream of people passing through. Those who went out were all distressed, while those who entered were all in high spirits. But when Longchen rushed over, the people at the door all scattered in panic. Because behind Longchen, there was a group of survivors who came to watch the fun. To be more precise, these people were all slaves whose strength had not reached the Emperor realm, but such slaves lived more like beggars in the remnant land. The people around didn't know what was going on at all. Just by looking at this formation, they had already scattered in all directions. Longchen turned into a stream of light and rushed into the casino. Then, streaks of fiery divine light soared into the sky. Soon after, a series of rumbling sounds could be heard. The entire casino began to shake, and a huge fire started to burn. Pucci! Pucci. Inside the casino. All those below the Emperor realm died at the hands of Long Chen. A first-level Emperor dares to cause trouble in my nine-tail casino? You're courting death. Kill him. He's from the village Tao Jiu mentioned. He's just an early D Emperor. Does he think he can defy the heavens? Take him down quickly. If we wait any longer, the entire nine-tail casino will be destroyed by him. Loud shouts could be heard as 5 beams of divine light shot out from the casino. The 5 of them were all martial emperors. 2 of them had even reached the 6th level of the martial emperor realm. They were extremely fast and charged towards Long Chen. The attack was about to land on Long Chen's body. However, a ray of divine light suddenly appeared under his feet. He broke through the air and dodged the attacks by a hair's breadth. Floating crane technique. You're from the fallen Crane clan? The leading 6th-level martial emperor suddenly stiffened and cried out involuntarily. This person clearly recognized the movement technique that Long Chen was using, which was an inherited divine ability. However, he did not know that Long Chen had only practiced the divine ability that originally belonged to the fallen Crane God clan during the 1 hour that he had flown over. Your nine-tail casino has killed tens of thousands of my people in the past 5 days. Today, you'll pay the price. Long Chen shouted coldly. His footsteps quickened, and the shadows of his fists became even more illusory. For a moment, he seemed to have turned into a flaming Vajra bathed in divine fire. He charged forward. The martial emperors couldn't even touch the corner of his clothes. Where did this person come from? Why did he come to the Lost People's land? The fallen Crane clan's inheritance technique and the God clan's fist technique. If his clan had such an inheritance, would there be no martial emperors to accept it? It's destroyed. It's completely destroyed. Almost everyone under the martial emperors in charge of the nine-tail casino has been killed by him. The entire casino has collapsed. The show is about to start. Streaks of flame shot up into the sky. The entire casino's giant wood was on fire. Long Chen didn't even look back as he swept across the sky and left. 100 breaths after he left, Tao Jiu and the others arrived with more than 10 late-stage martial emperors. However, when he saw that the entire nine-tail casino had almost turned into ashes, his entire face turned ashen. He reached out and grabbed the martial emperors in charge of the casino. He said coldly, "What the hell are you doing? Even a first-level martial emperor can turn this place upside down? Hurry up and take out all the magical artifacts on the steward's body that contain the slaves." The martial emperors all broke out in cold sweat and rushed into the ruins again. After a full hour, they came out again. But they knelt on the ground with a plop, their faces full of fear. Report. A total of 10 first-level martial emperors died. 7 second and third-level martial emperors died. Thousands of martial emperors died in the flames. More than 30,000 slaves have died in the hands of the emperors. Their artifacts have been destroyed on purpose. Pfft. Chapter 749. The few late-stage emperors from the Nine-Tail Casino chased for a few hours before giving up. They did not dare to go against Tao Jiu, but they had witnessed Long Chen's speed today. Long Chen had left before them for a long time, and it was impossible to catch up. They simply waited on the road back to the stronghold. As long as Long Chen did not return to the stronghold, it would be easy for Tao Jiu to obtain the right to use the stronghold at the end of the year. By then, this storm would be over. Of course, if Long Chen was blind and dared to return to the stronghold. Since that was the case, they wouldn't mind killing him. On the other side. In order to avoid contact with the people of the Remnant Land, Long Chen left the stronghold in search of another barren mountain range. It took him a full 3 days before he stopped. Seeing Long Chen stop, the Emperor Lord's voice appeared in Long Chen's mind. The Dragon Palace can help you deduce the various races' sacred arts. You can learn whatever I know. However, you have to learn the soul skill battle technique yourself. Soul skill battle technique? Longchen did not understand this term. However, the Emperor Lord's remnant did not have the intention to continue. He only changed the topic. Take out the 4 great divine cauldrons in your hand. I will tell you how to fuse with their origin to attract the world patrollers. Using the 4 great divine cauldrons to attract the world patrollers? Longchen frowned, but he still took out the 4 great divine cauldrons. The 4 great divine cauldrons appeared in front of him, but they seemed to have lost all their divine light, like ordinary iron tools. How can this be? How can the 4 great divine cauldrons be so ordinary? Longchen raised his eyebrows. He did not expect the situation to be like this. The Emperor Lord's remnant soul replied, although the corpse world is formed from my organs, it is still a world of its own. Apart from the origin of these 4 items, the rest are engravings of the corpse world's laws. Naturally, they have no use in the ancient sacred divine world. Without waiting for Longchen's reply, the Emperor Lord's voice fell and the 4 divine cauldrons condensed in his divine soul in the ancestral dragon main hall of the Dragon Palace. The 4 divine cauldron phantoms began to disintegrate at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, only 4 streaks of bloodlight were left. These 4 things are the 4 spirits in my heart. Now that I have fused them back into the origin, he is temporarily using them to attract the world patrollers, the Sovereign Master's remnant soul said. Longchen nodded. Unknowingly, the 4 divine cauldrons in front of him had turned into 4 streaks of bloodlight, just like the illusions in the Dragon Palace. The moment the blood-red light appeared, waves of divine light appeared in the sky. Don't use the footwork from before. I want you to use your physical strength to kill this world patroller. The Sovereign Lord's remnant soul saw the divine light flickering under Longchen's feet and stopped him. Fighting against a great perfection Emperor realm patroller with his physical strength? Longchen was stunned. Soon after, he said in a low voice, if what you said was true, I would have died 100 times before I could obtain the Emperor origin energy. The Sovereign Lord's remnant soul sensed Longchen's vigilance and defense. He snorted coldly. However, the divine light under Longchen's feet disappeared without a trace. The footwork imparted by Shu San of the Imperial College and his divine soul had completely disappeared. At the same time, one of the 4 streaks of bloodlight entered Longchen's body. The Sovereign Lord's remnant soul said in a low voice, if not for the fact that you have obtained the Primal Chaos Golden Codex and have a good mind, there are many divine clans in the divine realm who are more suitable to accept my will than you. Although I am only left with a drop of blood from my heart and a strand of my will, it is not difficult for me to take back the Primal Chaos Golden Codex and control the Dragon Palace to kill you. Longchen's face was a little ugly. This was because he knew that the Sovereign Lord's remnant soul was not lying. He could actually erase part of Longchen's memories from his divine soul. This was enough to show how terrifying this technique was. A centipede would die but not fall down. The might of a realm lord, even if it was just a drop of blood and a strand of his will, was not something a divine emperor like him could compare to. Before Longchen could speak, the 3 realm patrollers had already turned into shooting stars from the 9 heavens. 3 streaks of divine light blasted straight at Longchen. The might of a great circle divine emperor surged. Longchen did not even have time to dodge. His entire body was blasted into the ground. Poochie, Poochie. Longchen's physical body began to disintegrate at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this moment, he felt an unprecedented fear. Within the countless streaks of divine light, there seemed to be countless demonic creatures that wanted to devour him. Heavenly dragon vein, ancestral dragon celestial body. However, as soon as his voice fell, not only did he not condense the ancestral dragon celestial body, but his cultivation also began to rapidly dissipate. Seeing that the attacks were coming one after another, Longchen actually lost all of his techniques at this moment. He seemed to have gone mad. He roared and punched forward. Rumble. In the next moment, his physical body was completely shattered. Even his divine soul began to dissipate. After Longchen's divine soul was shattered, the 3 realm patrollers turned into streaks of divine light and disappeared between heaven and earth. after the realm patrollers left. Buzz, 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 a series of rumbling sounds rippled out. The divine soul that was about to dissipate actually condensed again in an instant. It was as if a vermilion bird or fire phoenix had been born from the fire. Huff, huff. Longchen crawled on the ground. His entire body was drenched in sweat. His eyes were sometimes clear and sometimes turbid. The Emperor Lord's remnant soul's voice sounded again. It said in a deep voice, "A true spirit can restore your physical body and divine soul 10,000 times over. As long as no one forcefully scatters your divine soul with the origin tide, you won't really die. However, once your mind collapses, you'll be completely dead. Even a true spirit can't condense your divine soul." Long Chen's mind sank into the Dragon Palace. He looked at the bloody figure in the ancestral Dragon Palace. After a long while, he said hoarsely, "This is the method you want me to become an Emperor Lord in 3 years?" The Emperor Lord's remnant soul glanced coldly at Long Chen. "If you want to become an Emperor Lord in 3 years, this is just the beginning. If you can pass this hurdle, you should be able to enter the middle stage of the Emperor realm with the help of Emperor Origin energy. An Emperor Lord can control 100,000 Emperor realm cultivators. Do you think you can achieve that by circulating a few rounds of your technique and absorbing a large amount of Emperor Origin energy? Even the youngest Emperor Lord in the entire ancient Saint Divine world has to cultivate for decades, or even centuries." Longchen was silent. At this moment, he was like a disciple who was being lectured. "Of course, if you think this path is too painful and you can die at any time, you don't have to do this. I'll take the Primal Chaos Golden Codex away and look for someone else." The Emperor Lord's remnant soul snorted. Longchen suddenly laughed and replied, "Once the Primal Chaos Golden Codex is born, I'm afraid the entire ancient Saint Divine world will be plunged into greater chaos. I'm willing to do everything I can to help you rebuild the ancient Saint Divine world. However, I have a request." Long Chen's tone suddenly became firm and serious. Chapter 750. Take me as your disciple. These 4 simple words stunned the Lord of the Ancient Saint Emperor. The two of them did not say anything after Long Chen's voice sounded. They remained silent for a long time. After a while, the two of them burst out laughing. The Sovereign Lord's remnant soul shook his head. He stared at Long Chen and smiled. "You're just like me in the past. You know that even if I take the Primal Chaos Golden Codex by force, you have a way to destroy it. If I don't agree to your request now, I'm afraid you won't believe me in the future." Long Chen said in a deep voice, "You can stay in my Divine Soul Dragon Palace and use my Divine Soul to nourish yourself. You can keep your will intact. You can also control the various powers in the Dragon Palace. I won't hand my life over to someone else for no reason." The Emperor Master's remnant soul looked at Long Chen with admiration in his eyes. Then, he said indifferently, "You are a rare living being in my organs. Although your potential is not as good as the many god tribes in ancient Saint Divine world, you are extremely compatible with my innate being. When I chose you from the Regent Steel and the ancient Saint Divine world's laws, it means that you're the most suitable candidate for me. Today, I swear on my last will in the ancient Saint Divine world that I've refined my entire life to take you as my disciple. I only hope that one day, you can rebuild the ancient Saint Divine world for me." The ancient Saint Emperor remnant soul's words were calm, but when he finished, Long Chen suddenly felt the entire ancient Saint Divine world start to shake. Above the firmament, countless starlight shot up from the ground, straight into the 9 heavens. There were thousands of stars in the northern foot territory. They were the thousands of Emperor Realm Masters under the Ethereal King in the northern foot territory. The light of the Emperor Realm Masters was enough to illuminate any place in the northern foot territory. Above these thousands of lights, there was a blazing sun that seemed to cover the sky. That was a God King. A place that no one could see. The entire ancient Saint Divine world was in an uproar. Even the existences above the God King level swept across the entire ancient Saint Divine world with their endless power. One after another, almost boundless voices spread throughout the ancient sacred divine world. One after another, unimaginable existences woke up from their slumber. The ancient sacred heavenly world's array formation is flashing. The origin source of the ancient sacred heavenly world is trembling. Another undying law has appeared. The ancient saint emperor still has a disciple. Since ancient times, the imperishable laws have appeared after the Lord of the Holy Emperors died. Could it be that he had a disciple before he died, and his disciple only came into the world today? Countless voices of suspicion filled Long Chen's unknown lands. Perhaps no one in the entire Northfoot territory could compare to someone who could pry into the undying laws. And the source of all this, Long Chen was still standing in the same place in a daze. He had never thought that a simple apprenticeship would cause such an uproar in the entire ancient sacred divine world. Long Chen took a deep breath and clenched his fists tightly as he looked at the venerable sovereigns who filled the sky like stars. He raised his head and exhaled, as if he wanted to spit out all the unhappiness in his heart. Plop. He knelt on the ground, bowed 3 times and kowtowed 9 times, and shouted, "Today, I, Long Chen, will take Lord Ancient Saint Emperor as my teacher. If you don't leave me, I will not betray you. If you don't, your bloodline will backfire, and your soul will fall forever." Inside the Dragon Palace, Long Chen's consciousness also knelt in front of Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul. The Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul stared at Long Chen, but could not help but shake his head. He knew what this 3 kneels and 9 kowtows meant to Long Chen. Ever since he had entered Long Chen's spirit, he had seen everything that had happened. He was also well aware of the fact that Long Chen had transcended the ruler realm. Therefore, he did not hesitate to expose himself and made a vow. Do you know what the imperishable laws are? Today, when I take you as my disciple, I have already established the imperishable laws. Unless I regain my position as the Lord of the Boundary, even if I violate this law, I will only vanish like smoke. The Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul said to Long Chen. Long Chen did not get up. His eyes were already covered in blood. In his previous life, he had been schemed against by the Transcendent Sovereign, and the matter of apprenticeship had almost become his demon. But today, he was once again apprenticed. No one knew how difficult this step was for him. But when he saw the countless sovereigns soar into the sky, the entire ancient sacred divine world reacted when the Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul made the vow. He knew that the Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul did not lie to him. Long Chen and the Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul both knew that this was the only way to gain the other's trust. The two of them shared the same body. If there was any doubt, there would be irreconcilable danger sooner or later. This matter of becoming his disciple was also the best way to resolve it. Why are you still kneeling? Get out and continue training. If you die, I will change my disciple to someone from the God clan who was born from the chaos. The Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul snorted coldly. A spiritual light directly blasted Long Chen's consciousness out of the Dragon Palace, trying to ease the awkwardness at this moment. Long Chen smiled bitterly and slowly stood up. He looked at the stars that were beginning to disappear in the sky, and his heart seemed to be filled with ambition. At this moment, he was not only cultivating for the sake of reviving Yi Hailan. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. In the sky, the 3 true spirits of the inner organs flickered again, and the realm patroller broke through the sky again. Long Chen raised his fist and punched again this time. At the moment when his body and divine soul were blasted apart, he still felt an unprecedented fear and nightmare. There was great terror between life and death. This kind of training was not only tempering his body, but also his spirit in an extremely brutal way. Every time his body was reformed, he could feel a strange force strengthening his limbs and bones. The true spirits of the inner organs were not only restoring his body and divine soul, they were also merging into his body. Again. Again. Under the divine light, Long Chen was constantly blasted apart. On the first day, he had experienced the feeling of death 200 times, and he almost died in between. If the Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul had not berated him at the critical moment, he would have died a violent death. Long Chen's entire body was limp on the ground. He felt the coldness from the ground, but there was an unprecedented tenacity in his heart. The Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul stood in the ancestral dragon temple of the Dragon Palace, and the Bloodman's eyes were filled with even more admiration. He muttered, "He withstood 200 times in one day, and almost didn't make it through once. He might really be comparable to the God Clan born from the chaos, but the intensity of this kind of training between life and death is a little too cruel. To become an emperor within 3 years, even among the God Clan born from the chaos, there are only a few who can achieve this." Whoosh whoosh whoosh. While he was thinking, he heard Long Chen fall asleep like an ordinary person. This day of cultivation was an almost terrifying torture to the divine soul and body. Only the Lord Ancient Saint Emperor's remnant soul knew that he was using the God Clan born from the chaos as the standard to teach Long Chen. He was even prepared to end the training if Long Chen gave up. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.